Chapter 589. If Zhang Jiuling was really that formidable, then he wouldn't be a human, but a god. Our Meng Shizhao would never have a chance, so how could there be today's war? The Wang clan truly was famous, and the former prime minister of the Tang dynasty was even more so. However, Wang Chang's words could only deceive those who weren't in the know. To an ambitious and ruthless character like Jelifeng, Wang Chang's words were complete nonsense. It would be strange if he would even listen to a single word. Damn it! Fenjie immediately reacted, cursing in his heart. It was all because Duke Jiu's reputation was too great. Everyone said that Duke Jiu was virtuous and respected, and his reputation as a virtuous minister was even more so. Fenjie had a preconceived impression of Wang Chong and believed it to be true. This despicable and cunning fellow. There's no need to get angry at him. When two countries go to war, each side will use their own methods and will stop at nothing. This has always been the case. The urgent matter at hand is to think of a way to attack the Annam Protectorate. Jelifeng waved his hand. To tell the truth, if he didn't have to think of a way to sweep through the southwest as quickly as possible and capture this place, Jelifeng would have been rather interested in Wang Chong. It had been a long time since he had encountered such a formidable youth. Whether it was offense or defense, everything was seamless, leaving not the slightest opening. Given Jelifeng's background and the fact that he had set up such a grave crime as rebellion, anyone else would have fallen into his trap. But Wang Chong had instantly neutralized this most dangerous of political plots. This wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Putting aside the art of war, for him to be able to handle affairs and adapt to the situation to such a degree was truly not something an ordinary person could compare to. This was also the reason why Jelifeng had made the prompt decision to not pursue the matter any further. "Follow me." Jelifeng unfolded his robe, turned around, and strode towards Daluan Ruozhen and Huoshu Wuzong. Almost at the same time, Daluan Ruozhen and Huoshu Wuzong led all the Uzun generals toward Jelifeng. Although they walked different paths in certain aspects, as the leaders of the Southwest, the two of them shared the same line of thought. "Does the Prime Minister have any ideas?" Jelifeng went straight to the point and said in a deep voice. "This kid is not easy to deal with." Daluan Ruozhen took a deep breath. "Our top priority now is to remove his defenses on the mountain. Without those steel defenses, the less than 100,000 soldiers of the Southwestern Protectorate Army would be completely incapable of stopping our army." "Yeah." Jelifeng also let out a long sigh. The Tang dynasty dominated the world with their infantry. Positional warfare and defensive warfare have always been their forte. The Wang clan seemed to be especially skilled in this aspect. In the Battle of Irai, we were able to completely defeat the Annam Protectorate, but it's impossible here. Jelifeng and Meng Shizhao's army had the deepest understanding of the changes in the Tang dynasty. From relying on their advantage in numbers to swiftly rout the Great Tang, to losing nearly 70,000 soldiers on the mountain, the Annan Protectorate army had completely changed in the minds of the Tang. The difference between the Annan Protectorate army and the Great Tang army was like the difference between heaven and earth. We underestimated this kid. He came prepared. He's the one we underestimated the most in this war. A Meng Shizhao general suddenly said. His words silenced everyone. Yes, rather than saying that they had underestimated the Annam Protectorate, it was more accurate to say that they had underestimated a single person. Whether it was Lion City, these scattered fortresses, or even the massive transformation of the Annam Protectorate, they had all been brought about by a single person. From a certain perspective, this war was a war between the Mengshi, Yusang army and one person. That person from the Tang dynasty had only sent one person to completely tip the scales of this war, as well as alter the course of this war that should have been in the bag. Imperial Father, Prime Minister, and generals, I feel that we shouldn't overestimate that kid in this matter. Fenjie suddenly spoke, a pensive look on his face. These words instantly attracted everyone's attention. Does Your Highness Crown Prince have a wise opinion? Daluan Ruozhen faintly smiled, appearing to be all ears. I wouldn't dare to say that I have a wise opinion, but has everyone forgotten why the Tang people chose to break out of the encirclement? Fenjie said pensively. Buzz. Fenjie's words caused everyone's eyes to brighten. Indeed, in terms of safety, Lion City was even safer than this place. The Annam Protectorate had chosen to break out of the encirclement rather than remain in the city for a very simple reason. They ran out of food. A Mengshi Zhao general suddenly said, revealing the crux of the problem. That's right. The Annam Protectorate left Lion City because their food supply was about to run out. There are nearly 100,000 men and horses. The people and horses have to eat, drink, and poop. This is not a small number. Fenjie's eyes shone with a sharp light, his gaze growing sharper and sharper. No matter how formidable that brat is, do you think he can conjure up enough food for 100,000 soldiers? The war in the southwest has only been going on for a little more than a month. Before the soldiers have moved, the rations have moved. This one once lived in the Tang dynasty, so I was fortunate enough to have some understanding of them. The Tang dynasty is different from us. Their territory is vast. In order to gather an army of 100,000 soldiers, they would need to gather them from all the prefectures and counties of the empire. The entire process is time-consuming and laborious, requiring a very long time. When I was studying in the capital during the Tang dynasty, I was fortunate enough to look up the historical records of the Tang dynasty. For the empires of the Central Plains, a 3-month war requires 3 years of food preparation and preparation. Moreover, the further north they go, the poorer the land and the lower the yield. They aren't like our Mengshi Zhao, where the sun is abundant and we can produce more rice than them. Thus, I can be sure that the Tang dynasty cannot prepare enough food for 100,000 soldiers in a short period of time. Even if that brat has wings on both sides, he can't conjure up enough food for 100,000 soldiers. Even if they surround the summit so tightly that not even a drop of water can trickle through, as long as we surround them and don't attack, they will die without question. When the time comes, it won't be us who will attack them, but them who will have to think of a way to break out and leave. As he spoke, Fenjie clenched his fists, his eyes blazing. Putting aside his status as the crown prince of Mengshi Zhao, no one had ever been able to outshine Fenjie in front of so many people like Wang Chong. Although Fenjie had never said it, he had long ago viewed Wang Chong as a thorn in his side. Your Highness, the crown prince speaks correctly. Even if we don't do anything, as long as we don't let the Annam Protectorate escape, they will quickly collapse without enough food. No matter what, they have no chance of winning this war? A Mengshi Zhao general immediately agreed. Jelifeng slightly creased her brow, but she said nothing. Your Highness, the Crown Prince's view coincides with this one's. But right now, there is still a small problem. Daluan Ruozhen faintly smiled as he suddenly spoke. Oh! Fenjie's brows rose, but he quickly lowered his head and modestly said, I would like to hear Prime Minister's wise opinion. Your Highness, the Crown Prince is a dragon among men. It's already quite good that you have noticed this. The problem of food truly is the lifeline of the Tang people, but this war is somewhat different from the past. Why does Your Highness the Crown Prince believe that we can attack the Tang people without worrying about attacks from other sides? A look of hesitation appeared in Fenjie's eyes. Prime Minister's opinion is? Just as that Wang Chong said, the Tang dynasty has 4 prefectures, Annan, Anshi, and Anbei, as well as 5 armies. Longshi's Big Dipper army. Right now, the other 4 armies have no time to deal with us because we have reached an agreement with the Abbasid Caliphate, Karak's Spazanu, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, the Goguryeo Empire, the Shi, and the Khitans. The tallest tree in the forest is the first to be blown down by the wind. It's not just us who want to deal with the Tang dynasty, but them as well. Thus, this is the reason they are willing to help us restrain the Tang dynasty's forces. But if we drag things out for a long time and we can't take the southwest, then the situation will be completely different. Once they believe that the Tang dynasty is still the same Tang dynasty, undefeatable, they will retreat. At that time, all of you should know what we will be facing. Daluan Ruozhen's words instantly silenced everyone. In truth, this was not some profound problem. It was just that as generals, they would subconsciously consider the problems at hand, the problems of the military, and not the problems of the overall situation or strategy. With the war in the southwest having reached this stage, there was no time to waste. There was no time to wait for the Annam Protectorate to collapse on its own. The earlier they attacked the Annam Protectorate, the earlier they could settle the situation in the southwest. It would also allow the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, Goguryeo, the Shi, the Khitans, and the other factions to settle down and join the war against the Tang dynasty. Time was fleeting, and the longer they delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for the Mengshi Yusang army. On this point, Jelifeng was more anxious than anyone else. After all, Uzun's men had a path of retreat, but Meng Shizhao's men did not. At this stage, costs were no longer considered. Thus, in the last 2 days of battle, Meng Shizhao had lost so many soldiers, including the heavy losses suffered by the White Stone Legion, that Jelifeng had not even mentioned. As an ambitious and ruthless person, Jelifeng was undoubtedly qualified. But Fengjie clearly did not understand the anxiety in Jelifeng's heart. Let's talk about the Tang rations later. Jeluofeng suddenly interrupted at this moment. Prime Minister, do you have any wise ideas about the current situation? There's no other way at the moment. Daluan Ruozhen shook his head and decisively said, if we want to deal with the Annam Protectorate, it's very simple. We first have to remove those steel walls they've erected on the mountain. If we can't do this, we'll have to pay the same enormous price as before. But that Qilin's son of the Wang clan truly isn't simple. If my guess is correct, he's probably brought an entire team of craftsmen here so that they can repair those steel walls at any time. If we attack at any time, he can repair it at any time. If this continues, there's no way to proceed. If we try to forcefully attack, we'll have to pay an even greater price than we imagined. If Prime Minister is worried about those steel walls, then leave the rest to us. Duanyang'an, I'll leave the rest to you. Chapter 590. Don't worry, Your Majesty. I will definitely complete the mission. The general named Duanyang'an turned around and left amidst the clanging sound of his armor plates. Since Your Majesty has already made arrangements, then Daluan Ruozhen will wait for good news from Your Majesty. If Your Majesty needs anything, please let me know. Uzun will definitely do his best to help. Daluan Ruozhen said quickly. Well, Prime Minister, thank you for your hard work. It's time for us to do something. Jelifeng just nodded and separated from Daluan Ruozhen. She quickly turned around and left. Do you really believe what His Royal Highness said? Besieging but not attacking, and the Tang people will collapse? After leaving the meeting place, Huoshu Wuzong suddenly said. When Daluan Ruozhen and Jelifeng were talking, he basically remained silent the whole time and did not intervene in their conversation at all. But at this time, he suddenly spoke. Hehe, some things are not easy to say in front of His Royal Highness. Think about it, since that brat came prepared and prepared so many steel walls, do you think he would have prepared sufficient military rations? Daluan Ruozhen waved his feather fan and said calmly. Huoshu Wuzong was startled and immediately stopped. But soon, Huoshu Wuzong caught up with him. But the Tang people's diet is completely different from ours. We can drink horse's milk, goat's milk, and only eat meat without rice, but they can't. And in such a short time, can they really do it? They have prepared for so long in Lion City, but it didn't take more than a month, did it? I don't know about this either. Hearing this, Daluan Ruozhen stopped. But you have seen the result of the battle so far. That guy can't be judged by common sense. Although with the past practice of the Middle Earth dynasty, I don't believe he can gather so much food in such a short time. But I also don't believe he is not prepared at all. No matter what, we have to think of a way to conquer the Annam Protectorate first. As for the issue of food, we will soon find out how much food they have, how much food they have stored, and how much food they have prepared. After saying this, Daluan Ruozhen quickly walked forward. Is everything fixed? On the summit, beneath the fluttering banner of the Great Tang, Wang Chong and Zhang Shouji stood facing each other. Zhang Shouji's face was full of sweat and he looked very tired. Ever since the construction of Lion City, he hadn't rested for a long time. Looking at Zhang Shouji's exhausted look, Wang Chong secretly felt sorry for him. But now, the fate of the soldiers of the southwest and the entire Tang dynasty rested on this battle. Wang Chong simply had no time to feel pity. He couldn't even say that he wanted to rest. Young Master's modular city walls are indeed exquisite. Although it looked like it had been smashed quite badly, many of the steel modules could be reused after some repairs. And this way, the damage won't be too severe. Based on Young Master's blueprints, we've already repaired nearly 90% of the walls. Zhang Shoji said. It's fine. It's fine as long as 90% can be used. Wang Chong nodded. The massive fireball attacks of Uzin's men had still had some effect. Nearly 10% of the walls had been damaged. But to Wang Chong, this was no longer important. As long as there was a war, there would inevitably be losses, and they were facing famed generals like Daluan Ruozhen and Huoshu Wuzong. 10% of the damage was completely normal. Moreover, 90% of the steel walls was enough to defend the Annam Protectorate and not affect the rest of the war. In addition, Zhang Shoji smiled as he spoke, but before he could finish, his vision swayed and he almost fell to the ground. Grandmaster, are you okay? Wang Chong's heart tightened as he hurriedly went to support Zhang Shoji. Master! Master! Around them, a few of Zhang Shoji's disciples felt their hearts tighten as they hurriedly rushed forward to support Zhang Shoji. These were all Zhang Shoji's closest disciples, all of whom had been under his tutelage for more than 7 to 8 years. To Zhang Shoji they were like a father. I'm fine. I'm just a little tired and didn't rest well. Zhang Shoji waved at everyone with a smile on his face. It was at this moment that Wang Chong realized that under Zhang Shoji's dark and dusty skin, he was actually completely pale. Wang Chong's heart also ached as he hurriedly called out to the people behind him, "Quick, pour some water for Grandmaster. Grandmaster has worked hard, you should rest well." Wang Chong helped him to sit down. Now that he thought about it, ever since he had met Zhang Shoji, if he wasn't having him build a city, then he was having him build a steel wall. Each of these things was a massive undertaking that required Zhang Shoji's constant supervision. In the entire project, everyone could rest, but only he couldn't. Especially after the war in the southwest had broken out, Zhang Shoji's mind had been completely focused on this project. Now that he thought about it, Wang Chong suddenly realized that he had often overlooked the fact that Zhang Shoji was different from himself, and even different from those soldiers. He was just an ordinary person. Zhang Shoji did not know martial arts. And from last night until now, in order to build these steel walls, he had actually not rested at all. Young Master doesn't need to consider me. To be able to follow at Young Master's side and do something for the Tang Dynasty, for the Tang Dynasty's army, and for the common people of the Southwest is the proudest and happiest thing that Zhang Shoji has ever done in his life. Even when I was building a palace for the imperial household, this old man was not so happy. It's enough for me to experience this once in my life. Zhang Shoji waved his hand. His expression was carefree, and there was an indescribable gratification in it. Young Master, if there's anything you need, just tell me. If you need this old man, Young Master, just tell me. Wang Chong nodded. Seeing Zhang Shoji's gaze, Wang Chong knew that anything else he said would be superfluous. Buzz. A finger suddenly pressed against Zhang Shoji's sleeping acupoints. It was not Wang Chong, but Qin Shusun. Take Master Zhang away. Before he wakes up, no one is allowed to wake him up. Qin Shusun said. Is Young Master all right? Wang Chong nodded. Master Shoji has expended too much energy, and I heard from his disciple that he hasn't rested in the last few days. We can't let him work too hard. In truth, in previous battles, we rarely allowed craftsmen to participate. No one in the Tang Dynasty has ever done what Young Master has done. I don't know if this is good or bad. Qin Shusun said. Perhaps not in the past, but there will definitely be in the future. The form of war will also have to change a little. Wang Chong said. That's right, Lord Protector General sent me to ask. Does Young Master have any thoughts on the upcoming war? Qin Shusun said. Xinyu Zhongtong currently held a great deal of respect for Wang Chong. The fact that he had sent someone to inquire about Wang Chong's opinion was enough to show his attitude. I don't know for now. Wang Chong shook his head. In the current situation, the Mengshi Yusang army is far superior to us. We are better suited for defense than offense. Positional and defensive battles are advantageous to us, but taking the initiative to attack might not necessarily be advantageous. At the very least, in this situation, we have the advantage. Wang Chong said. This mountain had actually already been transformed by Wang Chong into a fortress. Although it seemed to be segmented and filled with gaps, Uzun's cavalry were actually unable to display their might here. On the contrary, Lion City was more advantageous to the Uzun army. At the very least, their speed would not be reduced. And the siege ladders that Uzun had painstakingly built with so much manpower and resources were completely useless here. The walls were still there, but the siege ladders were useless. Moreover, Xinyu Zhongtong's strategy in Lion City was different. Wang Chong had adopted an aggressive defensive strategy. All the walls had been built in sections so that Yu Sang and Meng Shizhao would not be able to break through. At this stage of the battle, the Tang dynasty had no path of retreat. When an empire lost the respect of the surrounding countries, the only method was to openly defeat them on the battlefield, crush them, and win back their dignity. As for Wang Chong, he had no other choice. If he wanted to prevent the empire behind him from sinking into a quagmire of decline, and disaster, and change the empire's miserable fate, the only way was to completely defeat the Mengshi, Yusang army. No matter what price he had to pay. As he was speaking, the rear of Meng Shizhao's army suddenly became restless, the roar of a beast resounding through the clouds. The Meng Shizhao army on the left and right were thrown into an uproar, all of them scattering like they had run into the plague. Young master, what is that? Eagle suddenly couldn't help but take 2 steps forward. Wang Chong said nothing, but his eyes were madly twitching. He had heard this sort of roar before, but it did not belong to this world. Giant elephants? Wang Chong muttered. What? Eagle subconsciously asked. But before he could finish, he was drowned out by a heaven-shaking rumble. Rumble? From a distance, the earth seemed to be quaking, as if some massive creature was walking out from behind it. In just a few breaths' time, a black silhouette the size of a hill slowly appeared in everyone's field of vision from afar. These black shadows were extremely heavy, their bodies seemingly brimming with immense strength. Just by looking at them from a distance, one could feel a powerful pressure. And when one saw the ant-like Meng Shizhao soldiers next to them, this pressure only intensified. Boom! The originally quiet mountains suddenly burst into a buzzing sound, with a hint of panic. None of the 180,000 Annam Protectorate soldiers that had survived until now were ordinary. Whether it was in spirit or will, they were the elite of the elite. But when they saw those black shadows, even before they could see them clearly, their morale was already shaken. This was not a common sight. The White Elephant Corps. Chapter 591. The White Elephant Corps? Wang Chong turned his head. Although he had many memories from his previous life, none of them could compare to these old generals who had spent their entire lives dealing with Meng Shizhao and who had experienced the Battle of Irai. Chen Shu-sun nodded, his expression extremely grave. The Irai region is different from the Central Plains. The trees there are lush and the climate is hot. There are many wild behemoths there, and one of them has a long trunk and immense strength. Meng Shizhao calls it a giant elephant. Jelifeng had long ago wanted to tame these behemoths, and in the end, they managed to train an army called the White Elephant Corps. This White Elephant Corps doesn't have many people, but they are extremely formidable. We suffered a great loss at their hands in the Battle of Irai. A large number of soldiers died at their hands. Chen Shu-sun said. Rumble. The earth quaked as the behemoth corps got closer and closer. Finally, Wang Chong saw the giant elephant corps that Chen Shu-sun had spoken of. These were massive elephants. Although Wang Chong had seen elephants before, these elephants were completely different from the ones in Wang Chong's mind. Wang Chong had never seen such massive elephants. Each elephant was 6 or 7 meters tall, with some even reaching 8 or 9 meters. Just looking at their massive bodies was enough to stun one's heart. How could there be such large elephants? Wang Chong was also stunned. Wang Chong had never seen this White Elephant Corps, nor did he have any impression of them. They had probably been destroyed when the otherworldly invaders had appeared. But when he saw these massive elephants, Wang Chong felt an unimaginable shock. The adult wild elephants of the African continent, even the largest, were only 4 meters tall, but the elephants of the white elephant corps were more than twice as tall, and their bodies were 16 or 17 meters long. Their protruding tusks were 3 or 4 meters long. Even with Wang Chong's experience, he had never seen such massive wild elephants. These white elephants are even wearing armor, the eagle murmured. Compared to Wang Chong, who had seen it before, he was still mentally prepared. However, the eagle was completely unprepared. The eagle felt an indescribable shock at the sight of such a colossal creature. Its inscription elephant armor. Wang Chong murmured. The eagle was right. These elephants were covered in thick white armor, similar to the white plate armor worn by the Uzan people. Each plate armor was at least a foot thick and covered in inscriptions. With just a glance, Wang Chong immediately recognized that those were the toughening and defensive inscriptions that he was most familiar with. Given the thickness of the plate armor, even ballistae would find it very difficult to deal any substantial damage to them. In fact, the most shocking thing was the size of these elephants. Elephant armor, inscriptions. I'm afraid each of these elephants weighs more than 10,000 pounds. They're even heavier than a steel city wall. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Each of the steel walls that Wang Chong had constructed weighed several thousand pounds, but compared to Meng Shizhao's elephants, they seemed insignificant. Wang Chong suddenly understood what Meng Shizhao was planning. Assemble the ballistae and prepare to intercept them. Wang Chong ordered. Yes, young master. The messengers quickly left to carry out the order. At the same time, Meng Shizhao's army was also undergoing a transformation. Ha! Amidst the shouts, the Meng Shizhao soldiers surged forward around the white elephants, forming a human wall in front of the elephants as they pushed forward. And then the most worrying matter occurred. Following a series of shouts, one large shield after another flipped up, forming a huge shield above their heads and pushing it towards the mountain. Seeing this, it wasn't just Wang Chong. Qin Shuchong, Wang Yan, Xinyu Zhongtong, the Eagle, Luoji, and Lin Wushu all paled. No matter how slow they were, they understood that these shield-bearers were there to protect the white-armored elephants. Rumble! The earth shook as the white elephant corps got closer and closer. Standing on a high mountain peak, one could see one giant elephant after another constantly approaching. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the vast land, if one were to take a closer look, there were more than 1,000 of these elephants that were scattered all over the place, and they were approaching the mountain range. Although there weren't many of them, they were spread out over the vast plain, giving off an intimidating pressure. Ha! Finally, with an ear-piercing roar, the first wave of the white elephant corps finally reached the base of the mountain. Ready, fire! With this order, countless arrows howled down from the sky like locusts. Ding, ding, ding! The arrows rained down on the 7 to 8 meters tall elephant. Ding ding dang dang dang, all of them were blocked. The white elephant armor was like a thick wall, blocking all the arrows outside. Ready! At almost the same time, the white elephant corps soldiers reacted, raising their shields high above their heads. 7 or 8 soldiers rushed forward. Some of them slid down the elephant's trunk and opened up their shields to protect the elephant's tiny eyes. Not a single arrow was able to get close. And it was far from over. Begin! A white-armored Meng Shizhao officer raised his sword and swung it down. Swish! Countless chains flew out, vibrating in the air as if they had a mind of their own, quickly locking down the steel walls. The other end of the chain was quickly locked onto the elephant's body. Pull! Following the order, smoke and dust billowed on the mountain, and the huge steel wall collapsed with a loud bang. Then, with the help of iron chains, it was quickly dragged out of the mountain. In the face of the elephant's enormous strength, even the 7 to 8,000 gene steel walls that Wang Chong had spent a great deal of wealth seemed insignificant. In the blink of an eye, a huge steel wall was dragged away by the giant elephant. Without the cover of the steel walls, the Annam Protectorate soldiers behind the walls all had unsightly expressions. Let's go, let's go. Hurry and report to the lords. Let them decide. In the face of the swarm of white elephant corps soldiers, the entire phalanx turned pale and rushed higher up the mountain. Ah, we've lost, the Tang dynasty has lost. The Meng Shizhao army cheered. The mistakes of the past serve as a lesson for the future. The previous bitter defeat had left everyone deeply fearful of the Annan Protectorate army. But this time, the situation was completely different. Without the protection of the steel walls, the Annam Protectorate's advantage was gone, and they could no longer hold on. Rumble! With a rumble, in the blink of an eye, another steel wall collapsed, bound by 7 or 8 chains, and was dragged away by the elephant step by step. Boom, boom, boom. One wall after another, they fell one after another. In a short period of time, at least 30 to 40 steel walls were dragged away. Hold on, don't let them drag you away. Behind a steel wall, more than 20 Annam Protectorate soldiers were doing their best to drag the steel walls in front of them, engaging in a tug-of-war with the elephant. But in the next moment, with a rumble, dust roiled, and a huge rumble, more than 20 Annam Protectorate soldiers, along with the heavy steel walls, were all dragged down the mountain by the elephant. Ah! Screams rang out from the top of the mountain. Although they knew that the elephant was extremely powerful, no one had expected it to reach this level. More than 20 elite warriors at the peak of the true martial realm joined hands, but they were still not a match for this giant elephant. I'm afraid that even those at the 3rd or 4th tier of the profound martial realm wouldn't be a match for it. The eagle's eyelids twitched when he saw this scene. He had already broken through to the 3rd or 4th tier of the profound martial realm. In other words, in terms of pure strength, if he didn't use the 6-armed Xitigarbha Vajraguardian, even he wouldn't be a match for this elephant. And giant elephants like this could be found everywhere in the White Elephant Legion. The situation isn't looking good. In order to deal with the Tang dynasty, Jelifeng has schemed and schemed. This White Elephant Corps is actually a result of his meticulous accumulation to deal with the Tang dynasty in positional warfare. Chen Shusun said, "More than 1,000 elephants. Their strength is basically between the 3rd or 4th tier of the profound martial realm and the 8th or 9th tier. Some of them are even close to the peak of the 9th tier." Chen Shusun looked at an 11 or 12-meter tall elephant in the distance. That was probably the oldest, tallest, and strongest elephant in the entire White Elephant Corps. Many of the hairs on its body were gray-white. But its steps were still light and agile. This was probably the Elephant King of the White Stone Legion. Not even Chen Shusun had the confidence to deal with such an Elephant King. Such an Elephant King, in addition to more than 1,000 elephants, posed an enormous threat to the Tang dynasty. If Meng Shizhao's people completely uproot these steel walls, even if we still have an army of 90,000, we really will be doomed. Chen Shusun said in a low voice. The Annam Protectorate had dealt with Meng Shizhao's White Elephant Corps before. Chen Shusun was well aware of the White Elephant Corps' power. In terms of status of Meng Shizhao's 4 elite legions, the White Elephant Corps was actually far above the White Stone Legion. The reason it hadn't reached Uzin's first legion was because the White Elephant Corps didn't have that many of them. There were only 1,000 or so of them. Elephants are just inanimate objects. I don't believe they can be as nimble as martial artists. If it weren't for the protection of Meng Shizhao's troops, these elephants would be nothing more than targets. A voice came from the side. At some point, Lin Wusu and the others had walked up. As soon as they arrived, they turned their gazes to Wang Chong on the summit. "Young master, let me lead some men to kill these elephants. This general is confident that we can stop Meng Shizhao's people at the base of the mountain." "No need." Wang Chong waved his hand, his gaze fixed on the base of the mountain. "We still haven't reached that step." Boom boom boom. Just as everyone was talking, another steel city wall was uprooted and dragged out by the giant elephants, leaving a long mark on the ground. Chapter 592. "But, milord, if this continues, our defenses at the base of the mountain will be completely dismantled." Lin Wushou said somewhat anxiously. He had come here to ask for orders to lead the troops. Originally, there was no need for him to do this. But for some reason, Wang Chong had yet to issue the order. "Meng Shizhao hasn't attacked the mountain yet. They're waiting for us to leave our position and attack them." Wang Chong calmly said. His gaze was fixed on the base of the mountain, his mind in turmoil as he rapidly thought of a countermeasure. One had to admit that Jelifeng and Daluan Ruozhen were truly worthy of being the leaders of the southwest border. The existence of the White Elephant Corps truly was a sore point for Wang Chong. In a battle of 100,000 against 500,000, the greatest advantage was the favorable terrain and defenses. Moreover, Jelifeng was drawing support from the White Elephant Corps to slowly uproot the mountain's defenses and was in no rush to attack. If Meng Shizhao was in no rush to attack, Wang Chong would have no way of leaving the mountain to attack them. And as long as Wang Chong did not move, there would come a day when the steel walls on the mountain, the lifeline he had painstakingly built with a great deal of wealth, would quickly be torn down by Meng Shizhao. And the Annam Protectorate would be forced into a corner. But young master, are we just going to sit and wait for death? Lin Wushou looked at Wang Chong said, unable to conceal the disappointment in his eyes. Not necessarily. Wang Chong thought for a few moments, then suddenly said, call over the Master Archer Phalanx. A few moments later, the leader of the Master Archer Phalanx appeared in front of Wang Chong. Young master. The leader of the Master Archer Phalanx lowered his head in greeting. Is there any way to deal with the White Elephant Corps' giant elephants? Wang Chong asked. The giant elephants are covered in full-body armor. When Meng Shizhao forged them, they had already considered defending against the Master Archer Phalanx. The leader of the sharpshooters said sincerely, the White Elephant Corps only had 1,000 giant elephants. If they didn't defend, they would be wiped out in a single exchange. Therefore, Jelifeng had made thorough preparations at the beginning of the construction. What about the joints? If we can hit the joints, we can slow down the elephant's movements. Wang Chong frowned. No. The reason why Meng Shizhao chose the plate armor of the Uzun people and made it even thicker than the Uzun people's was because of this. Apart from the defensive power of the plate armor, the other reason was that there were very few joints on the plate armor. So there's not much of a chance. The leader of the sharpshooters sighed. What about the eyes? No matter how powerful the plate armor was, it shouldn't be able to block the eyes of an elephant, right? If we can hit the elephant's eyes, we might be able to kill them in one fell swoop. Wang Chong said in a deep voice. The giant elephant's eyes are indeed a useful place, but the giant elephant's eyes are very small, which is completely different from its huge body. Young master, you've also seen that the White Stone Legion has prepared 10 some soldiers for each elephant to protect them the entire time. Moreover, these soldiers are all well-trained soldiers. Our chances are too few. If there's no chance, we'll create one. Since there are soldiers protecting them, we'll kill them. Lin Wushou suddenly interjected. As he spoke, he made a fierce cutting motion. It's useless. The White Elephant Corps has definitely defended against this move. If we want to get rid of those defenses, we'll have to kill every member of the White Elephant Corps. This time, without waiting for the leader of the Master Archers to speak, Qin Shu-sun spoke up. Things on the battlefield definitely weren't that simple. Zhou Yuefeng had placed such importance on the White Elephant Corps that he had equipped them with the best armor and innumerable defensive inscriptions. He had even added armor to their bellies. This meant that he had already thought of everything. The only thing she hadn't considered was the eyes. No matter how they were protected, they couldn't possibly cover up the eyes of the elephants. But even so, Jelifeng had still prepared a massive army to protect them. From a certain point of view, the people of Meng Shizhao had already considered all the flaws they could think of when they were first established, and they had made thorough preparations. Boom, boom, boom. Dust roiled at the base of the mountain. As they spoke, the first ring of steel walls around the mountain had basically been uprooted. Giant elephants dragged the heavy steel walls. Escorted by dozens of White Elephant Corps soldiers, these steel walls weighing 6,000 to 7,000 jin were slowly dragged into the distance. Cries of alarm rang out from the base of the mountain. Having lost the protection of the steel walls, after failing to engage in a tug-of-war with the elephants, the Annam Protectorate soldiers had no choice but to move higher up the mountain. From start to finish, Meng Shizhao's people did not pursue them. Only when a few Annam Protectorate soldiers got too close would they stop them. The entire uprooting operation was unbelievably calm. And if one looked down from the summit, one would realize that Meng Shizhao had even dispatched a large number of generals for this operation, personally supervising each location. If anyone made any radical movements, they would be sternly ordered to stop. In fact, if anyone moved even a little too far forward, crossing some invisible boundary, they would immediately be whipped. The entire process of attack and defense was unimaginably harmonious. Seeing this scene at the base of the mountain, not only did the people on the summit not relax, but their hearts were heavy. Meng Shizhao's people have become very cautious. This is even more frightening than if they had turned out in full force. If this continues, in less than 3 days, all of our defensive fortresses will be uprooted. The entire mountain was quiet. Apart from the occasional conflict during the uprooting process, it maintained a rare peace. But the true atmosphere on the battlefield was completely different from what one would imagine. Compared to the intense battle before, the current atmosphere was countless times more tense. The anxiety and unease spread throughout the army like a plague. Haha, Uzun's prime minister speaks too highly of this brat. I'd like to see just how you'll break my white elephant core. In the middle of the vast white elephant core, Duan Yangyan, dressed in white armor, heartily laughed as he looked up the mountain. The white elephant core had already uprooted an entire layer of the Tang people's steel walls, but other than a few scattered defenses and a few itchy volleys of arrows, the Tang people had been unable to mount any effective attacks. If this continued, without wasting a single soldier, he would be able to easily push the Annan Protectorate army into a corner and completely eradicate it. Your Majesty, General Duan's White Elephant Corps is showing its effects. In Meng Shizhao's tent, a Meng Shizhao general suddenly spoke as he looked up at the summit. From the very start, all of Meng Shizhao's soldiers had been watching the movements of that slim figure on the summit. Everyone was waiting for their reaction. He was even sure that even the Uzun people were doing the same. But in reality, the mountain was quiet and there was no response. There was no doubt that they were truly helpless this time. We've grasped their weakness this time. No matter how formidable this Qilin son of the Wang clan is in the art of war, no matter how young he is and how wise he is, he won't be able to come up with any sort of plan this time. The bearded and scarred Meng Shizhao general said. Everyone looked up at the mountain with much more relaxed expressions. There are times when one has to be able to endure. Jelifeng indifferently said. As the emperor of Meng Shizhao, although she rarely went to the front lines, whether it was in terms of vision, experience, or magnanimity, Jelifeng had displayed abilities that far surpassed that of an outstanding leader on the battlefield. If we don't retreat, we retreat. Sometimes, retreat is actually an advance. The Annam Protectorate's strength lies in its terrain and its steel walls. Our army of 100,000 was repelled by them, and we even suffered grievous casualties. But if we weren't so impatient, they naturally wouldn't have any opportunities to take advantage of. Your Majesty is wise. The generals bowed. If there were still people who doubted Zhou Yuofeng's decision, now that they saw the results before them, no one doubted his decision anymore. Pass on my order. Tell Duan Yangyan to maintain his current momentum and not advance rashly. Otherwise, he will be held accountable for everything. Jelifeng said. Yes, Your Majesty. The messenger quickly left to carry out the order. Somewhat interesting. On the other side, Huoshu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen were also watching this tug-of-war. It seems like Jelifeng's White Elephant Corps is even more effective than our siege weapons. Huoshu Wuzong stood there like a towering mountain, his face expressionless. Daluan Ruozhen smiled but said nothing, only lightly waving his feather fan. It's time for him to put in some effort. Is there really nothing that can be done about that child? Huoshu Wuzong said. It seems like Meng Shizhao's White Elephant Corps truly is effective. However, before the dust settles, all of this is still unknown. The white feather fan suddenly paused in the air as Daluan Ruozhen spoke after a few moments of thought. But this is also a good opportunity for us. Pass on my order. Have Long Qinba lead the army and get ready. If the situation doesn't look right, immediately strike. If we can remove the Annam Protectorate in a few days, this will be of enormous benefit to us. It's about time that the War of the Southwest came to an end. Huoshu Wuzong nodded, non-committal. As long as Huoshu Wuzong's opinions weren't too serious, Huoshu Wuzong would usually not interfere. Rumble. A group of soldiers quickly departed. Long Qinba quickly led a group of Uzun soldiers into the ranks of the White Elephant Corps. If Wang Chang's Annam Protectorate dared to leave the mountain, what awaited them would be the bitter assault of the Uzun army. Boom! Dust billowed and soared into the sky. Following a series of rumbles, another steel wall collapsed under the hooks of countless iron chains, and was dragged into the distance step by those colossal creatures clad in white plate armor. Chapter 593. Boom boom boom. The sounds of buildings collapsing came from the mountain. The situation was becoming more and more disadvantageous to the army. Gongzi, give the order. On the summit, everyone was waiting for Wang Chong. At this rate, only death awaits us. Lin Wushou and the others turned to look at Wang Chong. Although he couldn't see the expressions of his father and Xinyu Zhongtong, Wang Chong knew that they were all waiting for him. It was a familiar feeling. In a trance, Wang Chong felt as if he had returned to the past, back to the bitter battle with the otherworldly invaders. Gongzi, give the order. Rather than passively waiting for death and watching them tear down the walls, why don't we charge down and fight to the death with them? One by one, the generals said vehemently. Even Luoji seemed tempted. In the current situation, it wouldn't be long before the Mengshi soldiers completely uprooted the steel walls of the mountain. When that time came, they would still have to face the elephants of Mengshi army. But by then, their morale would probably be completely different. Gongzi, no matter what, we can't allow Uzun's army to continue. Luoji couldn't help but speak up. Besides, there's no better way now. He was clearly leaning towards Lin Wushou's suggestion to attack. The only ones who remained silent on the summit were probably the Eagle and Chen Shu-sun. Gongzi, benevolence does not wield wealth, and benevolence does not command armies. At some point, Qin Guanshuan had also appeared on the summit. In the Annam Protectorate, his status was even higher than that of Luoji and Lin Wushou, and he was almost on the same level as Xinyu Zhongtong. The moment Qin Guanshuan spoke, the situation immediately changed. Although it was just the phrase, benevolence does not wield wealth, and benevolence does not command armies, it was enough to express the opinion of him and the other generals. In possession of Zhangzhou Jianxiong's token, Wang Chong wielded the highest authority in the Annam Protectorate. Moreover, the only person who could oppose him, Xinyu Zhongtong, had already handed over his military power, so it was even more impossible for anyone to oppose him. However, Qin Guanshuan and the others waited at the foot of the mountain for a long time, but Wang Chong's orders did not come. Wang Chong had even repeatedly ordered that no one was allowed to attack without permission. In the eyes of the crowd, it was clear that Wang Chong was young, so it was inevitable that he had the temperament of a young man. He didn't want too many casualties. However, the army itself was a cruel battlefield. Wang Chong's actions were clearly wrong. Whether it was out of love for Wang Chong, admiration for his military skills, or to protect the army, Chen Guanshuan felt that he had to urge Wang Chong to make a decision as soon as possible. If it could facilitate the completion of the grand strategy, an appropriate sacrifice was completely acceptable. No need. Before Chen Guanshuan could finish speaking, Wang Chong's eyes flashed. With a wave of his hand, he immediately rejected Chen Guanshuan's proposal. The matter is still far from reaching that step. For a moment, the surroundings were deathly still. Everyone stared in shock at Wang Chong. It was clear that Wang Chong's actions had far surpassed his expectations. Wang Chong paid no attention to the people behind him. He strode forward, crossing the ramrod in front of him and gazing down the mountain. The trumpeting of elephants continued to ring out, and the base of the mountain was a bustling scene. The Annam Protectorate was like a lone island floating in the middle of the Mengshi, Yusang army's sea. But when he saw this sight, Wang Chong's eyes shone with an unprecedented determination. Everything has a weakness. Even the White Elephant Corps that Jelifeng painstakingly trained is no exception. Countless thoughts flitted through Wang Chong's mind, and in a flash, he was thinking of many things. But they did not belong to this world, but to another. The elephants that Jelifeng had trained were very rare in this world. Even the eagle and Qinshu Sun had rarely seen them, and they had always described them as beasts. But in another world, it was something that couldn't be more familiar, something that couldn't be more common. It was just that these elephants were not as large. Many things began to flow into his mind, and Wang Chang's thoughts grew clearer and clearer. Animals like elephants and humans were usually isolated from each other. They had their own circles and rarely came into contact. But it wasn't as if elephants had never attacked humans before. Quite a few such stories were recorded in the annals of history. Wang Chong clearly remembered that those people had used spring thunder to chase away wild elephants. And the so-called spring thunder was nothing more than the massive explosions produced by gunpowder. In other words, elephants' ears are actually very sensitive to sound, especially loud noises. Wang Chong muttered to himself, his eyes suddenly shining. A giant elephant was still an elephant. The people of this world knew nothing about elephants, but if his judgment was right, then perhaps there was no need to create the so-called spring thunder, because in this world of martial arts, there were better things. At this thought, Wang Chong's lips curved in a smile. General Zhao. Wang Chong suddenly called out. Here. Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, General Zhao Hong, who was in charge of the archers, clenched his fists and strode over from behind. If I tell you that I have a way to move the shield in front of the elephant core's eyes, tell me, how confident are you in killing that elephant? Wang Chong asked. How is this possible? Zhao Hong cried out. Behind him, the generals of the Annam Protectorate were also shocked. The eyes were almost the elephant's only weakness, but if anyone could think of it, how could Meng Shizhao not? Thus, with these elephants as the core, it was almost an all-round protection. Wang Chong was on the top of the mountain. No one understood why Wang Chong was so sure that he could move the guards around the elephant. Just tell me, can you do it or not? Wang Chong's expression turned cold. I can do it. Zhao Hong's heart skipped a beat, and he hurriedly lowered his head and said, This subordinate can shoot multiple arrows at the same time and accurately hit the elephant's eyes. If young master can really do it? How many master archers like you are there in the army? Wang Chong nodded in satisfaction. No less than 50. Zhao Hong said. The Tang dynasty was different from the nomadic Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate and the Goguryeo Empire. Although they did not have that many top-notch master archers and condor shooters, they still had a considerable number of top-notch experts in the army. The only problem was that due to the battle at Irai, a large number of master archers had died, and there were not many left. Call all of them over. Give them the best arrows. Wang Chong said with an unquestionable tone. This subordinate will do as you say. Zhao Hong quickly left to carry out the order. After Zhao Hong left, Wang Chong turned to look at Chen Guanxuan and the others. General Chen, summon the most powerful generals in the army. I will need their help in a while. Wang Chong said. Chen Guanxuan's eyes were filled with doubt. The elephant's armor was extremely thick and could completely block the attacks of master archers. This had been tested earlier. Chen Guanxuan did not understand why Wang Chong was so confident and even asked Zhao Hong to gather the master archers in the army. Not a problem. Your subordinate will do so. Although Chen Guanxuan was puzzled, he did not hesitate at all. Before his voice faded, he turned around and strode away without hesitation. Zhao Hong and Chen Guanxuan arrived very quickly. 57 fully armored master archers appeared in front of Wang Chong, their quivers brimming with arrows. Chen Guanxuan had also brought 6 or 7 elite generals of the Annam Protectorate to Wang Chong's side. All of these people exuded a vast storm of energy, on par with Chen Guanxuan. What do these fellows want to do? The activity on the summit had quickly attracted the attention of the Mengshi Yusang army. The summit could be said to be the focus of all their attention. The slightest disturbance in the wind could attract everyone's attention. General, should we have our brothers be on guard? A guard next to the divine steed of Irai cautiously asked. Deliberately mystifying things. Duan Yangyen sneered, utterly disdainful of the activity on the summit. No matter what Wang Chong wanted to do, since he had not succeeded before, he was even less likely to succeed in the future. This general single-handedly established the White Elephant Corps. When I first established it, I considered all kinds of possible attacks. Thus, when I forged the elephant armor, I had already taken everything into consideration. I don't believe that this brat can deal with our White Elephant Corps. Duan Yangyen snorted disdainfully at the activity on the summit. But even though he said these words of disdain, Duan Yangyen's next actions were completely different. But what you say is reasonable. Pass on my order. Have our brothers tighten their defenses. Nothing can be allowed to go wrong. Yes, your subordinate will go. Young master, is this really going to work? On the summit, everyone had looks of shock and confusion on their faces. Because Wang Chang's words were too shocking, too inconceivable. For such a massive beast, such a powerful creature, to have such a weakness was simply inconceivable. Moreover, Irai was separated from the Central Plains. Not even the neighboring Annam Protectorate knew much about these behemoths that lived in the primordial forests. How could someone like Wang Chong, who had never left the capital or gone to Irai, know of them? Young master isn't joking, right? Moreover, could young master tell us where you learned of this information? Before Chen Guanshuan could speak, the Annam Protectorate generals behind him spoke up. They had heard that Wang Chong had a way to deal with the White Elephant Corps, so they had come to listen to his orders. It had to be known that not even Xinyu Zhongtong could order them around like this. But upon hearing Wang Chong's order, all of them had come without hesitation. But no matter how he thought about it, Wang Chong seemed to be joking. Roaring an elephant to death. Chapter 594. Although it's not enough to kill them with a single roar, this method can truly destroy Meng Shizhao's White Elephant Corps. Wang Chong held his hands behind his back, a faint smile on his face. As he spoke, he turned to Zhao Hong. General Zhao, are you ready? I will follow young master's orders. Zhao Hong took out several arrows from his back and held them between his fingers. At almost the same time, the row of master archers behind him formed a cylindrical formation, all of them drawing arrows from their backs and knocking them on their bows. General Chen. Wang Chong turned his gaze back to Chen Guanshuan and the other elite generals of the Annan Prefectural Army. His expression was frigid and brooked no rebuttal. Yes, young master. This time, the generals quickly chose to obey. Wang Chong was not the kind of scion who would put on airs. Even though he had Protector General Zhangqiu Jianxiong's token, Wang Chong had never put on any airs. But after interacting with Wang Chong for some time, the generals had gradually come to understand that Wang Chong was not the kind of person who would lightly make decisions, but once he did, he would not allow any rebuttal. In an instant, everyone's gaze was focused on the foot of the mountain. Rumble. Smoke and dust billowed as one steel wall after another was pulled down. Wang Chong's gaze was like lightning as he scanned the area, quickly locking onto a few mountainous elephants that were walking toward him. Begin. A cold light flashed in Wang Chong's eyes as he suddenly swung his arm down. As if on some sort of signal, 6 or 7 elite generals of the Annam Protectorate attacked at the same time. Roar. A furious roar exploded like thunder in the spring, splitting the earth and collapsing the mountains, shaking the entire battlefield. When 6 or 7 elite generals of the Annam Protectorate gathered their energy in their dantian and roared at the several dozen elephants in the east, the power was unimaginable. Rumble. It was as if a storm had passed through the earth. Sand and gravel were sent flying more than 10 zhang into the air. The Meng Shizhao soldiers were so frightened that they retreated one after another. However, the most unexpected thing was yet to come. Without any signs, those gigantic elephants with terrifying strength that could easily pull a 6,000 to 7,000 gene steel wall suddenly stood up and cried out in fear, as if they had been greatly frightened. Peng, peng. The bowstrings vibrated, and the moment these elephants suddenly jumped out of the protective shield, sharp arrows instantly pierced into their eyeballs. Some of the arrows had even pierced deep into the mammoth's brains. Rumble. The earth cracked and the mountains crumbled. Under the horrified gazes of countless people, these gigantic elephants with incomparably tenacious vitality suddenly collapsed like mountains of flesh. Whiz! Shock, endless shock. The sight of these elephants toppling to the ground left all the Mengshi Zhao soldiers of the White Elephant Corps dumbstruck. This is impossible. At this moment, the soldiers around the elephant were filled with terror, their minds blank. In Erai's 6 Zhao, the elephants had an extremely important and transcendent status. All the soldiers of the White Elephant Corps revered the elephants like they were gods. Their inconceivably enormous divine power had left an indelible impression on all the Mengshi Zhao soldiers. But no one had expected that after being covered in such thick and hard white elephant armor, these enormous elephants would still be so easily killed by a single arrow. But death was far from the end. For some people, not all the elephants had been shot through the head. Some elephants had used their thick eyelids to block the arrows, but this was only the beginning of the tragedy. An elephant trumpeted, and a Mengshi Zhao soldier's face was covered in fear as he watched the massive foot of an elephant grow in size and stomp down. In an instant, the soldier was crushed into a pile of meat paste. The severe wounds had caused the elephants to instantly go berserk, entering a fatal and blind berserk state. No one could imagine that an elephant weighing more than 10,000 jin in its berserk state could move so quickly and nimbly. Bang bang bang. In the blink of an eye, several hundred soldiers of the White Elephant Corps, unable to dodge in time, were trampled into meat paste. The closer they were, the faster they died. The soldiers that had been set up to protect the elephants had instead become the earliest victims. How could this be? These elephants really are afraid of noise. On the summit, Lin Wushu, Luoji, Chen Guanxuan, and the others were incredibly excited, all of them shocked and delighted, hardly daring to believe their eyes. Quick, there's very little time. Seize this chance. A voice rang out in their ears, its tone incomparably calm. Everything was just as he had expected. Although the giant elephant was huge, its tolerance for loud noises was exactly the same as an elephant's. But although the tactics were effective, Wang Chong was not the slightest bit perturbed. As a general, one should always maintain a calm and rational heart, never to be moved by the outside world. Only by maintaining calm could one make the wisest choice at the crucial moment. The world swayed and the winds howled. This time, without needing Wang Chong's orders, Chen Guanxuan and the others quickly made their decision. 6 or 7 of the best generals of the Annam Protectorate gathered their energy into a massive beam that enveloped a group of elephants to the southwest. The elephants bellowed. Half of them collapsed, while the other half once more went berserk. If these elephants still had their eyes, they would definitely accept the orders of the White Elephant Corps soldiers. But under the intense pain, their eyes couldn't see anything. All the elephants subconsciously treated the humans closest to them as enemies to vent their anger on. When a Xian realm elephant went berserk, and this elephant was even equipped with heavy elephant armor, that kind of terrifying power was hard to imagine. Shrill screams echoed across the entire battlefield. When the mountain-sized elephants went berserk in the dense battlefield, the soldiers were like wheat in the fields, falling down in large groups. Blood and flesh were squeezed out from under their armors like mud, while the armors were flattened like cans that had been squeezed out of a can. The entire battlefield instantly turned into an Azura hell. Quick, stop them. The faces of the soldiers were filled with terror. Some of them tried to band together and attack the charging elephants in a frenzy. But the spears were like scratching an itch. Stabbing the elephant's body with his saber was like scratching an itch through his boot. Not only did he fail to stab the elephant to death, but he was also sent flying by the rebounding force of the attack. The trumpeting of the giant elephants rose and fell one after another. The entire battlefield was in chaos. On the summit, Wang Chong, the top generals of the Annam Protectorate, and the master archers led by Zhao Hong were constantly adjusting their direction, seizing the opportunity to quickly attack. Southeast. Southwest. Quick, there's not much time. While they're in chaos, this is the best opportunity. In a short period of time, Wang Chong and the others had fired at least a dozen volleys of arrows, not pausing at all in between. They were extremely efficient. The advantage of Wang Chong's choice of a mountain range for the decisive battle was now fully revealed. Because of the obstruction of the towering mountains, their vision was limited, and they simply couldn't see what was happening on the other side. Many of the White Elephant Corps soldiers could only hear the screams and the angry trumpeting of the elephants. Before they could react, they had already been hit. The same strategy, the same method of attack, but it didn't work. The entire earth trembled. East, west, north, south, southwest, northwest. The trembling sounds of mountains collapsing could be heard. Every tremble meant that an elephant had been struck by an arrow and fallen to the ground. In a short period of time, at least 200 elephants had fallen. Animals were animals, after all. No matter how strong they were, they couldn't compare to humans. As long as one could find their weakness, even a giant beast like the giant elephant, which weighed more than 10,000 kilograms and had the strength to lift a mountain, could be easily killed. Damn it! Retreat! 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 On the back of the elephant, Duan Yangyan was both shocked and enraged, his entire body dumbfounded. The Tang people had watched helplessly as he tore down their outermost steel walls, and now the rain of arrows had caused the army to lose 200-some elephants. This change was far too great. Hurry! Duan Yangyan shouted these last words with almost all his strength. Even more shocked than Duan Yangyan were the assembled group of Meng Shizhao generals, Jelifeng, Fenjie, Duan Gechuan, and Duan Gechuan. When the elephants fell to the ground with a mournful wail, everyone was dumbfounded. The surroundings were deathly still, the atmosphere suffocating. Hurry and tell General Duan to retreat. The first to break the silence was Crown Prince Fenjie. It had not been easy to build the White Elephant Corps. These thousandsome elephants had taken a great deal of Meng Shizhao's energy and resources. Just capturing them was difficult enough, let alone decades of training. If Wang Chong were allowed to continue shooting, the entire White Elephant Corps would exist only in name, destroyed in a single day. Roar! At this moment, a heaven-shaking roar came from the southeast, interrupting the shouts of Qin Guanshuan and Lin Wushou. At almost the same time, two other heaven-shaking roars, like those of prehistoric beasts, came from the mountain and collided with the roar from the southeast. Huoshu Wuzong, Wang Yan, and Xinyu Zhongtong had finally taken action. On the battlefield, the elephants were restless, but with the intervention of Huoshu Wuzong, Wang Yan, and Xinyu Zhongtong, the situation immediately improved. Okay, let's stop with this wave for now. On the summit, Wang Chong waved his hand as he watched the panicked retreat of the White Elephant Corps, ending this wave of attacks. The farther away a sound wave attack was, the less effective it would be. Moreover, the crux of this kind of attack was the element of surprise. If they were prepared, everything would be completely different, and the effect would be greatly reduced. After saying this, Wang Chong's ears fell silent, as if there was no one behind him. Wang Chong froze and turned his head in astonishment. He immediately saw that everyone was staring at him in a daze. Chen Guanshuan, Lin Wushou, Luoji, and even Chen Shusun. What's wrong? Chapter 595. Young master, please accept this subordinate's bow. This subordinate was rude before. Chen Guanshuan suddenly took a deep breath and walked out of the ranks. He bowed deeply in front of Wang Chong. Behind him, all the highest-level generals of the Annam Protectorate also bowed. They raised their heads and gazed at Wang Chong, their eyes brimming with astonishment, admiration, and deep respect. The generals of the Southwest had all heard of Meng Shizhao's White Elephant Corps. This was an army that Jelifeng regarded with great importance, and it was also a force with terrifying combat power. All of them had personally witnessed the previous battle. But no one had expected that while everyone was still half acquainted with the elephants that lived in Irai, only knowing a few scraps of their claws, Wang Chong had already thought of a way to easily defeat them. This sort of ability was simply miraculous, surpassing everyone's imagination. Young master, can you tell us how you knew that these giant beasts are afraid of sound? Lin Wushou stepped forward, his face full of admiration. If they had known this method of dealing with the White Elephant Corps in the Battle of Irai, everything would have been completely different. At the very least, they wouldn't have been trampled to death by the charge of those giant elephants. Although Wang Chong had resided in the capital for a long time and rarely left, his vast knowledge and wisdom had already reached a level that others could only sigh in amazement at. This isn't that hard to guess. These giant elephants have very large bodies, but their eyes are inconceivably small, just a bit larger than normal humans. It's clear that their eyes are their weak point. Since their eyes are like this, their other senses might also be like this. So I thought of their ears. Wang Chong held his hands behind his back and faintly chuckled. No matter what, the memories of a soul from another world could never be spoken of in this world. Young Master's extraordinary talent is truly formidable. The top-class generals of the Annam Protectorate were all astonished. Although Wang Chong spoke briefly about it, in the eyes of the crowd, this was completely his normal behavior. As for Wang Chong's age, it was completely ignored. Although the attack had stopped, the matter of the White Elephant Corps was far from over. The berserk elephants rampaged through the crowd, and the losses suffered by the White Elephant Corps in this battle were almost entirely caused by the berserk elephants. At least 2,000 to 3,000 people were killed by the rampaging elephants. Even so, the White Elephant Corps still had to think of a way to pacify these rampaging elephants. Without elephants, the White Elephant Corps couldn't be called a White Elephant Corps. Your Majesty, what should we do next? Should we send other armies? Your Majesty, let me go. I am willing to lead the army to destroy the Tang people. In the middle of Meng Shijiao's army, several generals were extremely excited and wanted to join the battle. Let's call it a day. Jelifeng let out a long sigh, a rare look of exhaustion appearing in the eyes of this ambitious and ruthless character. The defeat of the Whitestone Corps and then the defeat of the White Elephant Corps, which he had placed his hopes on, had left a deep shadow in the heart of the Meng Shijiao emperor. 70,000 to 80,000 soldiers had died in battle. Generals, there is no need to talk about fighting. Wait until I see the Prime Minister of Uzan and have some ideas before making a decision. Yes, Your Majesty. The generals bowed their heads in greeting. In Irai, Jelifeng's status was similar to that of the Holy Emperor of the Tang dynasty. Her words were law. Any order, no matter what, would be thoroughly carried out. In addition, how are General Duan's injuries? Jelifeng asked. General Duan's injuries have already stabilized, a Meng Shijiao general said. A Meng Shijiao general said, knowing that Zheluofeng was speaking of Duan Wuzong. I'll go see him as well. With a wave of his sleeve, Jelifeng left the center of the army. As he left, the long blare of a horn came from the southeast. The vast Uzan army retreated from the mountain where the Tang people resided like the receding tide. Meng Shijiao also tacitly retreated. For a moment, a large area around the mountain where the Tang people resided had been emptied. Young Master, they've retreated. Old Eagle suddenly spoke as he looked down from the summit, amid the blustery winds. It's about time for them to retreat. Wang Chong glanced up at the darkening sky and sneered. The siege of the city, the rain of fireballs, the White Elephant Corps, the Mengshi, Yusang army had used at least 3 or 4 waves of attacks in a single day, but they had all been thwarted. If you know to retreat at a time like this, it's not too late. Daluan Ruozhen, Huoshu Wizong, and Jelifeng were all influential figures of the Southwest, people on the same level as Zhangqiu Jianqiong. All of them had to be looked up to. If anyone else had said these words like Wang Chong, they would have been snorted in contempt. But when Wang Chong said these words, no one felt that there was anything wrong with them. He had already used his actions to amply prove that he had the strength and qualifications to say these words. Not even the generals of the Annam Protectorate had realized that Wang Chong's position in their hearts had already surpassed that of Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong, who had been fighting a life-and-death battle with them for more than a month. Pass on my order. The army is to turn on the stoves and start cooking. But young master, what if they use this chance to attack? The eagle said, if they dare. With a cold laugh, Wang Chong flicked his sleeves and turned to leave. This kind of tactic was meant to force them to attack, and Wang Chong was more than happy to see them attack at this moment. This is blatant contempt. That child is mocking us. As smoke rose from the top of the mountain, Huoshu Wuzong suddenly spoke, his gaze on Daluan Ruozhen. his meaning was clear. Rather than saying that Wang Chong was mocking the Uzun, it would be more accurate to say that he was provoking Daluan Ruozhen. What can I do? My skills are inferior. Daluan Ruozhen smiled bitterly. You'll admit defeat? Huoshu Wuzong had a look of disbelief on his face. Huoshu Wuzong could not be more familiar with this prime minister of the Ngari royal lineage. Anyone who thought that Wang Chong would really admit defeat would be gravely mistaken. Those people who believed that Daluan Ruozhen would easily concede had been reduced to a pile of yellow mud in the past few days. At the very least, if Zhangqiu Jianxiong was around and saw this expression on Daluan Ruozhen's face, he would definitely raise his guard. However, this kid really can't be underestimated. Even when Zhangqiu Jianxiong was around, he wouldn't have been able to force me to this extent. Daluan Ruozhen's brows furrowed deeply at this last sentence. Huoshu Wuzong also fell silent. Having worked with Daluan Ruozhen for many years, he couldn't be any more familiar with Daluan Ruozhen. There was no doubt that Daluan Ruozhen was speaking from the bottom of his heart. To be able to receive such an evaluation from Daluan Ruozhen, Wang Chong should be proud of himself. Dusk fell and the sky darkened. The entire battlefield had sunk into silence, with only the torches burning in the darkness, their glow like stars. At this time, the Tang people, Meng Shizhao's people, and Uzun's people were living in harmony, a rare moment of peace. Buzz! In the darkest hours of the night, no one noticed that several figures had silently appeared on the northwest side of the mountain. This is the place. A figure with 2 sabers sheathed on his back stood at Daluan Ruozhen's side. It was the fierce Uzun general Tumi Sangza, as well as Longqinba and Xiren Xiangxiong. All of them had solemn expressions on their faces. The prime minister had never done anything meaningless, and he certainly wouldn't do such a thing now. Just what is this kid doing? Xiren Xiangxiong slowly raised his head, looking from the base of the mountain all the way to the summit. This was a long passage, around 10 some zhang long. Unlike the other parts of the mountain, there were no steel walls here, only tens of thousands of caltrips of various sizes. The largest of these caltrips were 4 to 5 feet tall, while the smallest were only the size of a thumb, but all of them were covered in sharp thorns. Hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions, of these caltrips were pouring down from the summit, forming a black river of thorns that was as straight as a waterfall. This river of thorns was particularly striking amidst the walls of the mountain. Could it be that they don't have enough materials, that they don't have enough steel walls? An officer of the Uzun tribe asked in shock. Impossible. Just look at how many thorns there are here. With so many materials, wouldn't the steel walls be enough to fill up this passage? Longqinba coldly said. He was basically the only one left of the 5 tiger generals. The others were all valiant generals of the tribe like Xiren Xiangxiong and Tumi Sangza. But even so, not even Tumi Sangza dared to offend Longqinba too much. As the leader of the 5 tiger generals, Longqinba was an extremely valiant existence. Since that's the case, there must be a problem here. That brat probably wants to use this place to do something. Xiren Xiangxiong suddenly said. It would be strange if there wasn't a problem with this abrupt river of thorns. Tumi Sangza, can you use your halo to turn all these halos into metal men and get rid of them? Daluan Ruozhen suddenly said, a profound look in his eyes. I can, but it won't be very easy. A troubled look appeared in Tumi Sangza's eyes. These thorns, large and small, are almost all covered in toughening inscriptions. With so many thorns, the number of metal men I can make with my abilities is extremely limited, and it will consume an enormous amount of stellar energy. And if I use metal men to clean them up, the metal men don't have bodies and won't be affected by the thorns, but the noise will also alarm the Tang people on the mountain. Moreover, there are far too many of these thorns. My abilities are probably very limited. Chapter 596. Metal element ability users were not invincible. In his battle with Luoji, Lin Wushu, and Qin Guanxuan, Tumi Sangza had consumed a great deal of his stellar energy. Moreover, summoning the metal giants consumed stellar energy. His strength was simply not enough to clear away these hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of metal brambles. Even if he summoned 100-some metal men, he still wouldn't be able to accomplish this arduous task. Daluan Ruozan silently raised his head to the summit, countless thoughts flitting through his mind. Although he couldn't see anything in the pitch-black darkness, Daluan Ruozan suddenly saw that figure standing motionlessly on the summit, seemingly plotting something. In all his years at the helm of the Ngari royal lineage and 10-some years of fighting with Zhangqiu Jinxiong, Daluan Ruozan had never found anyone so unfathomable. At every moment, his opponent seemed to be plotting something. This caused Daluan Ruozan to fall into a daze, as if he was seeing another version of himself. Truly a formidable foe, Daluan Ruozan muttered to himself. After a few moments of silence, Daluan Ruozan turned to Longkinba. "Are you ready?" Replying to Prime Minister, "We're ready." All 5,000 warhorses have been wrapped in the cloth provided by Meng Shizhao. Longkinba sternly said. "Very good. Then let's begin," Daluan Ruozan firmly said, his eyes turning cold and piercing. War was never limited to the day. Night was also a fierce battlefield, but unlike the day, without the visibility of the day, the Annam Protectorate's defensive capabilities would be greatly reduced. Daluan Ruozan had specially chosen the middle of the night, when people were the most sleepy, to prepare for his assault on the camp. Boom! Daluan Ruozan had just given the order when there was a massive boom from the southwest. Flames soared into the sky and battle cries filled the air. Looking from afar, one could vaguely see an army rampaging inside, wantonly slaughtering. Report! Almost at the same time, a warhorse galloped forward. An Uzun herald rushed over, looking travel-worn. "Prime Minister, Meng Shizhao's people are under attack. The Tang people have raided the camp in the middle of the night." As soon as these words came out, everyone's expressions suddenly became incomparably interesting. When they thought of robbing the Tang people's camp, the Tang people robbed the Meng Shizhao's camp first. What's going on? Don't tell me that Meng Shizhao's people aren't prepared? Daluan Ruozan said with a hint of anger. Jelifeng was also an ambitious and ruthless powerhouse of the southwest. It would have been one thing if others had been on guard against this kind of mistake, but how could he have made the same mistake? "No, the people from the Annam Protectorate are wearing our Uzun armor," the messenger said hurriedly. Swish! These words caused Longkinba, Tumi Sangza, Xiren Xiangxiong, and even Daluan Ruozan to instantly grimace, all of them grimacing. Damn it! Longkinba fiercely clenched his fists, his face ghastly pale. This was not the first time he had clashed with Wang Chong, so he didn't need to think too much to know that this was Wang Chong's plan. It was one thing for this bastard to raid the camp, but he had even disguised himself as them. Meng Shizhao must have misunderstood their identities, allowing Wang Chong to successfully raid the camp. Bang! While the generals were still reeling from the sudden change in Meng Shizhao's army, there was another explosion and a roar that shook the heavens. But this time, the sound did not come from Meng Shizhao's camp, but from the mountains behind them. Kill! Capture the Uzun! Don't let them escape! Young Master already had a plan. Raiding our camp is nothing but wishful thinking. As the voices came from the mountains, both Daluan Ruozan and the other generals grimaced. We've been tricked. Everyone was looking at Daluan Ruozan, but none of them said a word. Ah, young master, these fellows really did take the bait. On the summit, in the darkness of the night, the generals roared with laughter as they looked up and down the mountain at the two blazing torches. A strong point is a weak point, and a strong point is a weak point. If Daluan Ruozan wants to use the methods of raiding camps he learned from the Central Plains to deal with the Tang dynasty, then I can only say that he's found the wrong person. Wang Chong looked down the mountain, a faint smile on his face. Although he couldn't see anything, Wang Chong was sure that Daluan Ruozan's expression must be very interesting at this moment. Uzun did not know any military strategy. Although the Great Snow Mountain Temple had a transcendent status and was filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons, in terms of military strategy, it was just a barren land. The Central Plains had always been a land of military strategy. Compared with the military strategy culture that had been accumulated for thousands of years in the Central Plains, even the Great Snow Mountain Temple was not worth mentioning. as expected of a prime minister who likes to raid camps at night. Wang Chong couldn't help but laugh in his heart. It was no secret to Wang Chong that Daluan Ruozhen liked to raid camps at night. At this time, it was already quite good to have this kind of idea of raiding camps. Unfortunately, his opponent was Wang Chong. Wang Chong was only on guard against him. He didn't expect that Daluan Ruozhen would really be tricked and send people to raid the camp. Click on the profile picture and you'll find it in the history. Smiley face, how was it? Wang Chong asked. Following young master's orders, we prepared ballistae and set up an ambush. The vast majority of them were killed by us. Less than 1,000 managed to escape, a commander reported. One of the generals who passed the order said, "That's enough. Let them go." In addition, have the Uzun and Meng Shijiao soldiers who died in battle during the day collect their armor. Although we've already used this move before, as long as the Mengshi Yusang army remains, we can still use it. Yes, young master. The messenger quickly turned and left. In the battle during the day, 60 to 70,000 soldiers had died on the mountain. In this era, many armies would choose to bury these corpses, push them down the mountain, or abandon them somewhere else. But to Wang Chong, these corpses were still things that he could use. Although the Annam Protectorate could only passively defend during the day, it was completely different at night. Given Wang Chong's personality, he would never resign himself to death. This was the only opportunity for the Tang people to strike, as well as the best. As long as Uzun and Meng Shijiao were still allies, Wang Chong could constantly pretend to be Uzun soldiers to attack Meng Shijiao, and then pretend to be Meng Shijiao soldiers to attack Uzun. Call General Chen and the others back, Wang Chong said as he gazed at the fiery light at the base of the mountain. In addition, tell them to circle around Uzun's camp on their way back and raid the Uzun camp before coming back. Tell them not to linger in battle and not to linger in one place. Yes, young master. Raiding a camp had to be done when the enemy was unprepared. There was only a split second, so the opportunity had to be seized. In addition, they had to constantly charge forward and not linger in one place. By raiding a camp, they had to leave with a single stomp and not linger in one place for too long. Otherwise, it would become a proper battle. Luji, Chen Guanshuan, and all the other generals of the Annam Protectorate had returned with their armies. Even from a distance, one could hear their hearty laughter. Pretending to be Meng Shijiao soldiers to attack Uzun soldiers, pretending to be Uzun soldiers to attack Meng Shijiao soldiers, only Wang Chong could think of such a thing. My lord, this plan is too ingenious. The Uzun and Meng Shijiao soldiers are probably going to explode with anger. Daluan Ruozhen has been completely suppressed by young master this time. With young master here, what does our Annam Protectorate have to fear? That's right. What Jelifeng, what Duan Gichuan, what Huoshu Wuzong, what Daluan Ruozhen are worth in front of young master. Torches flickered, and under the illumination of the flames, everyone's faces were fiery red, and they looked incomparably excited. The War of the Southwest was like a mountain weighing down on everyone's heart. Every day was heavy, the atmosphere so heavy that it was hard to breathe. But it was different with Wang Chong. Not only could he keep out legendary figures of the Southwest like Huoshu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen, leaving them helpless, he could even launch an attack and toy with them in the middle of the night. It's good that generals are confident. Wang Chong also chuckled. It could be seen that this victory had greatly boosted everyone's confidence. This had imperceptibly raised the morale of the army and boosted everyone's morale. This was one of the reasons Wang Chong had sent them out to raid the camp. But although he was happy at the start, Wang Chong couldn't help but frown at the end. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated in 100 battles. Huoshu Wuzong didn't understand me and simply didn't expect me to raid the camp at a time like this, so he fell for the trick. But this sort of thing can only happen once. Generals, you absolutely must not be careless. Neither Huoshu Wuzong nor Daluan Ruozhen are easy targets. Although he was very happy to hear the praises of the crowd, if he were to underestimate Huoshu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen because of this, he would be in deep trouble. Huoshu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozhen's reputation had been forged, not built from flattery. Even the ferocious tiger of the southwest, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, couldn't do anything to them, so how could people like them be easy to deal with? Even though they had won consecutive victories, Wang Chong didn't dare to underestimate them. It wasn't because he was afraid of them, but because Wang Chong knew that it wasn't that Hushu Wizong, Daluan Ruozhen, Duan Gichuan, and Jelifeng didn't want to make a move, but that they didn't think that it was the right time for them to do so. When that time came, it would be the true decisive battle. Whether it was the Tang dynasty, Mengshi Zhao, or Uzun, none of them would have any path of retreat. The casualties at that time would definitely not be as high as they were now. Yes, young master. Hearing Wang Chong's words, the crowd roared in agreement, their expressions filled with deep respect. There shouldn't be any trouble tonight. Everyone go back and rest. Stay alert. Yes. Chapter 597. Prime Minister, when are we going to launch the general offensive? In the Uzun commander's tent, Jelifeng, Duan Gichuan, Fenjie, Duan Yangyan, and all the other Uzun generals were gathered together. Wait a little longer. Now is not the time. Daluan Ruozhen's voice was firm and unquestionable. A hint of anger appeared in the eyes of all the Mengshi Zhao generals, but none of them dared to say anything. Although the two sides of the Uzun Yusang army were equal, everyone knew that the true commander of this battle was not one of Mengshi Zhao's men, but the Prime Minister of Uzun, Daluan Ruozhen. All the offensive plans had been formulated by Daluan Ruozhen. Has Prime Minister still not gotten a good grasp of that brat's background? Jelifeng said with a frown. That brat from the Wang clan had displayed a military strategy that was completely different from any of the generals they knew of. Daluan Ruozhen wanted to probe him, and Jelifeng had no objections. He was not a daring and ambitious person. Once he agreed, he would be handing over the decision of the entire battle to Daluan Ruozhen, as well as the timing of the general offensive. Since he had made this promise, Jelifeng would definitely keep it and would not randomly interfere. But in this probing operation from day to night, Mengshi Zhao had already lost far too many men, and the night raid had especially enraged them. This was also the reason they had appeared here. No one had expected that the Tang people would still dare to attack them in this sort of situation. This was a naked humiliation. But if after paying such a high price, Daluan Ruozhen still said that he had not obtained any information, that he had not gotten a good grasp of that brat's background, then Jelifeng would find it rather difficult to accept. More or less, but I'm still lacking something. Daluan Ruozhen said faintly. He glanced at Jelifeng and smiled. Your Majesty, I know it's hard for you to accept, but think about it carefully. At the banks of the River, your White Stone Legion easily defeated the Annam Protectorate. If this is still the same Annam Protectorate, with the lineup that the king sent out yesterday, your Mengshi Zhao's people would be able to defeat it without our Uzun's intervention. But is that really the case? Jelifeng, Mengshi Zhao, and the other generals fell silent. Although it was just a test, Mengshi Zhao also launched a powerful attack. Whether it was the White Stone Legion or the White Elephant Legion, neither held back. Compared to the Battle of Arai, Mengshi Zhao was fighting on the same level of power. But the result of the battle was the opposite of everyone's expectations. At least, one thing Daluan Ruozhen said was correct. Even Jelifeng had to admit that the Annam Protectorate with Wang Chong was indeed different from before. But Prime Minister, when will we attack? The Tang dynasty can't spare any manpower right now, but if we delay any longer, the advantage will no longer be on our side. Jelifeng said patiently. Mengshi Zhao's greatest advantage in defeating the Tang people at the banks of Arai was numbers. More than 300,000 Mengshi Zhao elites had been dispatched to deal with the 180,000 Annam Protectorate soldiers who had left the cities and entered the wilderness, and they had won in one battle. And now, in the alliance between Mengshi Zhao and Uzun, in Jelifeng's view, their greatest advantage was also numbers. It was precisely because the two armies occupied an absolute advantage that they had the confidence to win against the less than 100,000 Annam Protectorate with 400,000 to 500,000 soldiers. Giving up the advantage in military strength and testing the waters time and time again, they would only lose their advantage. As for the Annam Protectorate, They should swarm in together and use their advantage in numbers to completely annihilate them. This was the best strategy. No matter what methods the opponents used, in the face of absolute numbers, they were all insignificant tricks. Your Majesty, I know that you lost a lot of troops last night and are very angry. But now is not the time to be angry. The opponents we are facing are much more powerful than we imagined. Daluan Ruozhen didn't hide anything in front of Jelifeng. Although Zhangqiu Jianxiong is known as the ferocious tiger of the Tang dynasty, even he wouldn't be able to force us to this extent. Zhangqiu Jianxiong is a crafty old fox. If it were him, he wouldn't have left the city. If he had left the city, with our current military strength, we would have long since unified the southwest. Jelifeng said straightforwardly. Someone like Zhangqiu Jianxiong would never allow himself to fall into such a disadvantageous position. Given his personality, he wouldn't give anyone the slightest opportunity to exploit. If Zhangqiu Jianxiong was still in charge of the southwest, Jelifeng wouldn't have a chance at all. Even the ferocious tiger of the southwest couldn't do anything to them, so how could someone like him be dealt with so easily? It wasn't because he was content, but because Zhangqiu Jianxiong wouldn't give him the chance. This was completely different from Wang Chang's style. No crafty old fox like Zhangqiu Jianxiong would be able to force him into this state. Not even Zhangqiu Jianxiong would be able to reverse the situation, but that boy on the mountain had done it. Although that boy is very formidable, don't praise him too highly. Daluan Ruo grinned and stretched out 2 fingers to pinch a corner of the cloth. With a tug, he revealed a sand table that had been made at some point in the tent. The mountain range on the sand table was particularly large and detailed. Even the steel walls on the mountain range, the steel walls that had been uprooted at the base of the mountain, and the disposition of the soldiers could be seen on the sand table. Prime Minister! Seeing this detailed sand table, everyone in the tent was slightly moved. No one had noticed that Daluan Ruozhen had made such a detailed sand table in such a short period of time. This level of observation and efficiency had left a deep impression on all of them. Daluan Ruozhen only chuckled. Only by knowing oneself and knowing one's enemy could one emerge victorious in every battle. It wasn't as if he had done nothing since yesterday. I've basically figured out that boy's strategy. The hills of the southwest are low, and the majority of the land is flat plains that are conducive to cavalry charges. Thus, he intentionally led us to this mountain. First, he could slow down the cavalry's charge, and second, he could minimize our advantage in numbers. No matter how many soldiers we have, this mountain can only hold a limited number of soldiers. In other words, even if we still have more than 400,000 soldiers, the number of soldiers that can participate in the assault at the same time is still limited. Everyone in the tent frowned. They hadn't thought so before, but now that they thought about it, that boy really had chosen this place on purpose. As for that boy's strategy, it's very simple. He's using the terrain and the steel walls to build a fortress. This way, the Tang people are most skilled in positional warfare. As for his strategy, all of you should have already experienced it. Daluan Ruozhen looked at the generals of Meng Shizhao. It's to constantly make use of all kinds of formations. This kind of advancing and retreating to destroy your formation. If you chase after them, you'll lose your formation. If you don't chase after them, they just need to repeat what they did before. Then what do we do now? Zhou Yuofeng creased his brow. Meng Shizhao had already lost nearly 100,000 men to Wang Chong using this method. There was no doubt that this method, although simple, was very practical. In particular, that boy had obviously used this set of tactics to the acme of perfection. Haven't you noticed? Until now, Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong haven't made a move. Now, it's not that I don't want to launch an all-out attack, but I need an opportunity, a suitable opportunity to launch an all-out attack. Otherwise, once we forcibly launch an all-out attack, you saw the result yesterday. Do you want to pay a greater price than that? Daluan Ruozhen looked at Jelifeng and said. Inside the tent, all the generals of Meng Shizhao, including Jelifeng, were silent. This war had already exhausted all of Meng Shizhao's national strength. What looked like 300,000 soldiers was actually all of Meng Shizhao's strength. If all of them died here, How could they deal with the possible attacks of the Tang dynasty in the future? Moreover, if they suffered too many losses and did not have enough troops, Meng Shizhao would become Uzun's servant. How could they be allies? What does Prime Minister think? A voice suddenly asked. It wasn't Jelifeng, but Duan Gechuan, who had been silent all this time. Duan Gechuan hadn't said anything since he entered the tent. In fact, in the process of forming an alliance between Meng Shizhao and Uzun, Duan Gechuan had tried his best to hide himself. Many times, people had overlooked his existence. But when Duan Gechuan opened his mouth, whether it was Jelifeng, Fenjie, or the other Meng Shizhao generals, all of them naturally accepted that he was overstepping his bounds. Even Jelifeng had no objections. Give me 3 days. After 3 days, I will give you an answer. Daluan Ruozhen said. Okay. Duan Gechuan's words set the tone for the entire meeting. A faint white light rose from the east. In the southwest, where the clouds of war were thick, this was the only way to know that the sun had risen. In the wilderness, there was silence. Wang Chong sat cross-legged on the summit of a mountain, motionless. Spiritual energy gathered from all around him and sank into Wang Chong's body. The spiritual energy flowed into Wang Chong's meridians and circulated through his body. Eventually, it met with an invisible barrier and came to a halt. Ah, it's still a little lacking. Wang Chong gave a long sigh and opened his eyes. The war in the southwest had already reached an extremely intense level. Wang Chong could sense that the Mengshi army was impulsive to launch an all-out attack at any time. After continuous probing and launching small-scale battles, this was also the natural and inevitable method they would adopt at the same time, because numbers were their greatest advantage. Chapter 598. The killings these days, especially the last strike that killed Jiao Sero, had accumulated a large amount of blood qi in Wang Chong's body. But this blood qi was surging like waves, and he had been unable to convert it into the power of the profound martial arts realm. Why can't I break through? Based on my previous life's holy martial arts realm cultivation, the profound martial arts realm is no problem for me at all. But why is it that I'm stuck in the true martial arts realm? Is it because I've cultivated the little yin-yang art and absorbed the blood qi? Wang Chong thought to himself. The great yin-yang heaven creation art was known as the greatest evil art in the world in his previous life. It was also one of the top 10 divine arts, and its speed of advancement was unimaginable. But even so, to tell the truth, Wang Chong didn't know much about this secret art, especially when it came to breaking through to the next realm. Wang Chong had never asked his master, the evil emperor, how to break through to the profound martial arts realm. Now that he thought about it, this was a huge miscalculation. And if he thought about it carefully, perhaps his master, the evil emperor, wouldn't have expected that he would reach the peak of the true martial arts realm so quickly and be on the verge of breaking through to the profound martial arts realm. After all, it required killing a large number of warriors and absorbing their power, and Wang Chong was only a teenager. But on second thought, Wang Chong felt that something was wrong. Somehow, Wang Chong remembered the art of life slayer that So Yong-sun had taught him. The art of life massacre was born out of Senior Su's art of God and demon obliteration, and the art of God and demon obliteration is one of the mystical arts of the righteous path. Compared to the great yin-yang heaven creation art, yin and yang go against each other. Could it be that this problem arose because I cultivate in both evil and righteous arts? Whether it was the art of God and demon obliteration or the great yin-yang heaven creation art, they were both unparalleled mystical arts that Wang Chong had never come into contact with in his previous life. Many peerless experts have not even had the chance to come into contact with one of these two mystical techniques, let alone cultivate both at the same time. Now, Wang Chong felt that he was walking on a path that he had never thought of, an unfathomable path. Wang Chong thought for a long time but couldn't figure it out, so he simply stood up. The eagle, how is my big brother? Eldest young master has taken young master's medicine and is much better now. The eagle said sincerely. Wang Chong nodded and quickly walked in. Did you observe it? In a place that Wang Chong couldn't see, a voice came, carrying a special meaning. Milord, they've already started cooking. a Meng Shizhao man respectfully said to the people behind him. Behind him, there were a few other people, all of whom were sent by Jelifeng to assist Daluan Ruozhen. Carefully observe the number of cooking fires they have. Daluan Ruozhen said. The few people responded and quickly disappeared into the distance. No one knew what Daluan Ruozhen was doing, but neither Jelifeng nor Duan Gichuan said anything. For 3 days in a row, Daluan Ruozhen had been sending people to observe the Annam Protectorate's daily cooking from all directions of the mountain range. After 3 days, Daluan Ruozhen's brows slowly furrowed. How is it, Prime Minister? What happened? Jelifeng said. Although he didn't do anything in the past few days, everything Daluan Ruozhen did couldn't escape his eyes. However, Daluan Ruozhen didn't say anything, and even Jelifeng didn't know what he was doing. The situation is not good. Daluan Ruozhen's brows furrowed so tightly that Jelifeng's heart skipped a beat. Do you remember what I said to you before? It seems that child has not only brought a large number of steel walls, but also a large number of rations. How is that possible? Jelifeng and the generals behind her all paled. The Annam Protectorate had already found it difficult to deal with the steel walls they had built. If they also had a large number of rations, then they would be helpless. Why is Prime Minister so certain? Crown Prince Fenjie couldn't help but ask. Your Highness, do you still remember why the Annam Protectorate abandoned the city to break out? Daluan Ruozhen said. Of course it was because they didn't have enough rations and had no choice but to do so. That's right. Based on my estimation, their rations wouldn't last a day, but that's not the case at all. You must have noticed that I've asked people to observe the number of stoves they have for the past 3 days, but the number of stoves the Tang people have not decreased at all. Daluan Ruozhen's expression was solemn. This means that the Tang people definitely have more rations than we know. They must have enough rations in reserve to dare to do this. As soon as Daluan Ruozhen finished speaking, even Duan Gichuan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. He didn't have much contact with Daluan Ruozhen and didn't know much about General Uzhen's style of doing things. However, even Duan Gichuan didn't expect that Daluan Ruozhen could see so many things from the number of stoves the Tang people had. The reason why I stopped His Majesty and didn't want to launch an all-out attack was because I wanted to find out the number of rations the Tang people had and then make a decision. But now everything is developing in the direction we don't want to see the most. Daluan Ruozhen said. It was rare for anyone to see Daluan Ruozhen so solemn and panicked, but there was no doubt that the rations Wang Chong had prepared had completely disrupted his plans. The Tang dynasty has always taken a lot of time and effort to prepare rations. Just how did he do it? Prime Minister, I still find it hard to believe. Crown Prince Fenjie muttered to himself. If what Daluan Ruozhen said was true, then Wang Chong's abilities were unimaginable. There's no meaning in discussing this. That brat has already done it. There's no doubt about it. Daluan Ruozhen's expression was incomparably ugly. Daluan Ruozhen hadn't cared that the Annam Protectorate led by Wang Chong had defeated Meng Shizhao and Uzhen in succession, but when he determined that the Tang people had enough rations, Daluan Ruozhen instantly found it hard to remain calm. Because this meant that Wang Chong and the Annam Protectorate had the ability to contend against them for a long time. Is there really no other way? Wushu Wuzong normally didn't interrupt, but at this time, he couldn't help but show his concern. Let me think. There has to be another way. Daluan Ruozhen waved his hand, clearly somewhat distraught. All of you go out first. Let me have some peace. An imperceptible trace of worry flitted through Wushu Wuzong's eyes. He had worked with Daluan Ruozhen for so many years, but he had rarely seen him pushed to this point. Everyone go out first. Wushu Wuzong quickly led everyone out of the tent. From dawn to dusk, Daluan Ruozhen sat alone in the tent. No one dared to disturb him. However, they didn't have to wait for too long. Around dawn the next day, Daluan Ruozhen finally walked out of the tent. Ha, you think you're so smart? You think you're so smart. Before Daluan Ruozhen appeared, a hearty laughter came from the tent. The tent door opened, and the haze that had been hanging over Daluan Ruozhen for the past few days was swept away. Prime Minister, how was it? Everyone went up to greet him. To be honest, Daluan Ruozhen's reaction yesterday really shocked everyone. Ha! Prime Minister, did you find a solution? Jelifeng walked over with his head held high. He had sent people to keep an eye on Daluan Ruozhen this entire time. If there was even the slightest sign of trouble, he would be notified. Not bad, I've already found their flaw. No matter how much he calculated, that brat still missed something in the end. Your Majesty, give me 10 days and I will definitely let you have a taste of what you want. Daluan Ruozhen heartily laughed, his expression glowing. This is the wise minister I know. Jelifeng had a gratified expression on her face. Seeing the expressions on the faces of the two commanders, Uzun, Meng Shizhao, and all the other generals immediately relaxed. Prime Minister, did you really find the flaw in the Tang people? Fenjie's eyes glowed as he excitedly asked. That's right. Although that brat from the Wang clan is formidable, he hasn't reached the point where his plans are flawless. Do you see this mountain? This is where he was the smartest, but it is also where he blundered the most. Fenjie, Duan Yangyan, Siren Xiangxiong, all of them looked at Daluan Ruozhen as he walked out of the tent, exchanging glances. Prime Minister, please instruct me. Fenjie humbly said. Don't you see this place? Water can be dug out of the plains, but Your Highness the Crown Prince, let me ask you, can water also be dug out of a mountain? Daluan Ruozhen's words left all the generals of Mengshi Zhao and Fenjie dumbfounded. Even Long Qinbo was confused, not understanding what his commander meant. Only Huoshu Wizong had a pensive look on his face, as if he understood something. Does Prime Minister mean to say that they lack water? A voice rang out. Duan Gechuan suddenly interrupted. Correct. Daluan Ruozhen had a solemn expression. It's easy to get rations, but where do we get our daily drinking water from? Don't we need water to light a fire and cook? If my guess is correct, that son of the Wang clan's only source of water was that torrential downpour several days ago. But no matter how prepared he was, he definitely didn't store much water, and it definitely wasn't enough for 80 to 90,000 horses. Even if he came prepared and prepared a large number of bags of water, it definitely wouldn't be too much. In 10 days, at most 10 days, I'm confident that they'll have used up most of their water supply. That will be the best time for us to attack. The more Daluan Ruozhen spoke, the brighter the eyes of the generals became. Towards the end, even Jelifeng couldn't help but have a strange look in her eyes. Haha, Daluan Ruozhen, I truly didn't make a mistake. You truly do have a good plan to defeat the enemy. Jelifeng heartily laughed, her anxiety of the last few days swept away. That's right, Your Majesty, this general suddenly remembered something. During the night raid a few days ago, we found that quite a few bags of water were missing. A Mengshi Zhao general suddenly remembered something and spoke. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere immediately became completely different. Everyone was certain, and there were no longer any doubts. Young Master, the Mengshi Yusang army at the base of the mountain has begun to move. A guard on the summit suddenly reported. Wang Chong immediately stood up and began to walk forward. As expected, from the summit, he could see that the Mengshi Yusang army that had been silent for the last few days had suddenly begun to move. A hint of confusion flitted through Wang Chong's eyes. Chapter 599. Daluan Ruozhen? Wang Chong was inwardly surprised. It had been several days since he had seen this Uzun Prime Minister. As the saying went, those who came did not come with good intentions. For Daluan Ruozhen to come out at this time could not have been anything good. Prime Minister, I trust you have been well since we last met. Wang Chong spoke first, his voice rumbling in all directions. Young Master, it's been a long time. Daluan Ruozhen leisurely waved the feather fan in his hand, a smile on his face. Seeing Daluan Ruozhen's expression, Wang Chong's heart thumped. There was definitely something strange about this man who could still smile and look so calm after suffering so many casualties. Prime Minister seems to be in a good mood. Wang Chong said calmly. A young master has been very comfortable these last few days. Daluan Ruozhen said with a smile, his expression even more relaxed. To tell you the truth, this minister has come today to tell young master something. Wang Chong had a pensive look on his face. Prime Minister is truly in a leisurely mood. Young master, don't misunderstand. This minister actually admires young master. The smile on Daluan Ruozen's face grew wider and wider, the fan in his hand growing slower and slower. Whether it's Lion City or this city of steel, young master's vision and talent have left a deep impression. I can see that young master has come prepared. But this minister would like to ask, has young master prepared enough water? With these last words, Daluan Ruozen put away his feather fan and began to laugh heartily. But Wang Chang's pupils constricted, his expression suddenly changing. In the distance, Daluan Ruozen withdrew his troops and vanished once more, leaving only his laughter echoing throughout the battlefield. At the summit of the mountain, Wang Chong was motionless, his expression extremely grave. A gentle breeze blew past, but his body felt incredibly cold. "What's wrong, young master?" The eagle walked over from behind and asked with concern. He found out. This was the only thought left in Wang Chong's mind. There was a huge flaw in all of Wang Chong's plans, and it couldn't be fixed no matter what, and that was the water source. There was very little precipitation in the southwest, and a torrential downpour like the one before was already extremely rare. However, the daily necessities of nearly 100,000 men and horses had to be solved. However, water was different from steel. Wang Chong could not transport water like steel. Moreover, in order to deal with Uzun and Mengshi Zhao, Wang Chong had chosen to fight in the mountains, which made it even more difficult for Wang Chong to obtain water. This was something that could never be remedied. Wang Chong had been trying his best to hide this, but in the end, Daluan Ruozen still found out. "Call Mr. Zhang Shouji over." Under the flagpole, Wang Chong suddenly spoke. "Young master." Zhang Shouji had arrived much faster than expected. Behind Wang Chong, Zhang Shouji respectfully bowed. Zhang Shouji's face was still pale, but after the eagle had struck his sleeping acupoint, his complexion was much better. In addition, Wang Chong had given him some pills that could strengthen his body and revitalize his blood. In the end, they had still had some effect. "Senior Zhang, how much water do we have left? How much has Su Yiqin prepared for us, and how much longer can the army last?" Wang Chong said after a long silence. "Lady Su has already been very attentive and prepared a large number of water bags for us. However, water is a very special thing and cannot be transported like ordnance. In addition, when we arrived here early, according to young master's orders, we dug many reservoirs on the summit. We also received quite a bit of the torrential rain. In addition, young master had us arrive early and dig a water source nearby so that we could prepare for the battle. So, our water supply is actually quite good. In addition, in the previous night attack, we also looted many water bags from Meng Shizhao's people. However, the daily water consumption of 80,000 to 90,000 soldiers is not a small number. No matter how much water we have stored, it is ultimately not enough." Zhang Shouji said. Only he and Wang Chong knew about the water supply of 80,000 to 90,000 soldiers. No one else knew at all. It was to avoid the possible panic that might be caused. Water was different from food. It seemed inconspicuous, but it had to be used every day. Cooking, daily drinking, and war horses were all indispensable. Without sufficient water, the army would have problems, and it was even more fatal than food. The key was that Wang Chong had chosen to fight on the mountain, which meant that the problem of water supply was destined to be a natural defect that could not be remedied. This was fish and bear's paw. They could not have their cake and eat it too. Daluan Ruozen had hit his Achilles heel. "Tell me, how many days can we last?" Wang Chong said calmly. 10, 12 days. Zhang Shouji said. "Just how long?" Wang Chong frowned as he spoke once more. 10 days, no, 9 days at most. Zhang Shouji hesitated, clenched his teeth, and finally told the truth. The expressions of the eagle, Chen Shu-sun, the guards on the mountain peak, and the messengers all changed. Earlier, when Daluan Ruozen had come out to talk to Wang Chong, they had already sensed that something was wrong. But now that they only had 9 days' worth of drinking water, they realized that the situation was far more serious than they had imagined. In an instant, The atmosphere on the mountain peak became incredibly heavy. But the entire mountain peak was silent. Everyone kept their mouths shut, not daring to utter a single word. So, after 9 days, they will launch a large-scale attack? The eagle said worriedly. There's no need for 9 days. 5 days, 6 days at most, and they will launch their attack. Daluan Ruozhen will not wait until we run out of water to attack. Wang Chong said gravely. Daluan Ruozhen would not wait that long, and neither would Jelifeng. In 5 days, the army would immediately experience an obvious water shortage. The warhorses and their daily drinking water supply would all experience an obvious change. If they had not known beforehand, the army would not have had any problems. But Daluan Ruozhen clearly knew this, which was why he had specially met with him. And on the 6th day, the situation would worsen and morale would be shaken. The warhorses' drinking water, the soldiers' drinking water, would rapidly decrease. Everyone could sense this change. But Wang Chong had no choice but to do so, because once they changed their strategy, they would consume a large amount of water. Given Daluan Ruozhen's style, he would definitely change his strategy and delay it until the 7th day. Or if he discovered that Wang Chong had continued to do so, the Annam Protectorate's water supply would be depleted much faster, and they would not be able to last until the 9th day. Once the army ran out of water, only death awaited them. Young master, why don't we start a water restriction now? Perhaps we can still last until the 12th day. Zhang Shouji probed. No need. Wang Chong said without hesitation. If we change our strategy now, morale will drop. Daluan Ruozhen will immediately launch his attack in less than 5 days. Also, don't forget why we're here. Old Eagle and even Chen Shu-sun trembled in shock as they reacted. Wang Chong had told them before that a war had 2 aspects, tactics and strategy. In terms of tactics, their goal was to hold back the Mengshi, Yusang army and hold them down. As for strategy, the outcome of a war would not be decided by just 1 or 2 battles. For Wang Chong, there was another factor that would decide the outcome of this war of the Southwest, the imperial court. I wonder if Big Uncle and the King of Song have made any moves? Wang Chong quietly said to himself. The Tang dynasty truly had declined. The people longed for peace, and the long years of peace had caused the Tang dynasty to gradually lose its initial drive. Wang Chong was sure that the Tang dynasty was currently surrounded by other powers that were restless and full of hidden dangers. The Turks, Goguryeo, Arabia, Karak-Spazinu, and the kingdoms of the western regions, past and potential enemies of the Tang dynasty, were working with the Mengshi, Yusang armies to restrain the Tang dynasty's forces. But the Tang dynasty was still the Tang dynasty. It had accumulated over 100 years. Wang Chong was confident that as long as he could delay the Mengshi, Yusang army for a while, the imperial court would eventually send reinforcements. How is it? Outside Uzun's tent, everyone was gathered. Daluan Ruozhen and Jelifeng were at the front, Huoshu Wuzong and Duan Gichuan at the back, and then the other generals. Nearby, the mountain where the Tang dynasty had set up camp looked like a massive beast from prehistoric times. But everyone's gazes followed Daluan Ruozhen to the smoke curling up from the summit. Every day, the commanders of both sides would punctually appear at the 3 meals of the Tang army to observe. This had already become a marvel for the Mengshi Yusang army. The amount of smoke hasn't decreased in the slightest compared to yesterday. The Tang people still haven't controlled their water usage. Fen Jie added. He had been a hostage in the capital of the Tang dynasty and had lived there for some time. He had dabbled in the art of war, Confucianism, and many other things. Thus, he had a little understanding of how to judge the temperature of a stove. This is the brilliance of that son of the Wang clan. Daluan Ruozhen sighed. Putting aside their respective standpoints, Daluan Ruozhen actually felt a great deal of admiration and praise for Wang Chong. This was definitely a formidable foe. If he was allowed to fully mature, not even Daluan Ruozhen knew how much he would grow. But it was precisely for this reason that Daluan Ruozhen could not allow him to leave alive. The great Tang army is already beginning to doubt my words. If he starts to control the water usage right now, the water will last a little longer, but the army will probably begin to panic. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will get. This will be much worse than not controlling the water usage. But will this be of any use? Crown Prince Fenjie asked. Of course not. Daluin Ruozhen roared with laughter. No matter what he does, it's useless. This is his Achilles heel. No matter how smart he is, he can't do anything about it. Your Majesty, the moment you've been waiting for has come. In 7 days at most, we will launch our all-out attack. Chapter 600. On the second and third days, Daluin Ruozhen and Jelifeng continued to observe, but the number of Annam Protectorate posts never decreased. But the mood had subtly changed. Just when Jeluofeng and Daluin Ruozhen believed that this would always be the case, on the fourth day, something completely unexpected occurred. Flap flap. A massive pigeon, pitch black in color, flapped its wings and landed in the Uzun army tent. It's news from the northeast. Daluin Ruozhen glanced at the symbol on the pigeon's leg and took off the leggings, a hint of confusion in his eyes. The northeast of the Uzun Empire was naturally the Tang dynasty's Longxi. That was where Tadra Konglo and Dusong Mengpoj were currently engaged in a fierce battle with the Big Dipper army commanded by Geshu Han. Tadra Konglo had no problem suppressing Geshu Han, and the Big Dipper army could only defend, not fight back. Daluin Ruozhen did not understand why Tadra Konglo had sent the message at a time like this. With a hint of confusion, Daluin Ruozhen tore open the message in the leggings. Bizizi. Daluin Ruozhen suddenly paled. What's happened? Huashu Wuzong walked out from behind him. Take a look for yourself. Daluin Ruozhen handed over the letter. There was only a very short paragraph on the paper. The Tang dynasty's war god, Wang Zhongxi, had left the capital and was heading for Longxi. Huashu Wuzong paled. This is troublesome. Huashu Wuzong muttered to himself, his expression grave. From the top to the bottom of the Uzun Empire, including the Tsenpo, if there was one person that everyone feared, then that person would be the war god of the Tang dynasty, Wang Zhongxi. Between the Uzun and the Tang dynasty, in the several wars led by Wang Zhongxi, the Uzun had almost always suffered a crushing defeat. Even the great general Lord Tadra Konglo had suffered a crushing defeat at Wang Zhongxi's hands. The Tang army led by Wang Zhongxi had even almost attacked the plateau and occupied the capital of the Uzun Empire. Later on, when they heard that Wang Zhongxi had entered the palace to become the crown prince's junior guardian, the entire Uzun Empire almost celebrated. Everyone heaved a deep sigh of relief. To the entire Uzun Empire, Wang Zhongxi's action was absolutely earth-shattering news. We don't have much time left. The great General King won't be able to hold on for much longer. Daluin Ruozhen said with an ugly expression. In the entire Tang dynasty, there was one person that Daluin Ruozhen could not control, Wang Zhongxi. This person's level had completely surpassed Daluin Ruozhen's. Although Daluin Ruozhen was not willing to boost the morale of others and diminish his own, in all fairness, Tadra Konglo was no match for Wang Zhongxi. He had heard that Wang Zhongxi's body was riddled with hidden injuries and that in order to recover, he had been forced to enter the palace to take up the post of Crown Prince's junior guardian. But now, it appeared that these rumors had all been baseless. To the Uzun Empire, this was an extremely bad sign. Wang Zhongxi will need at most 10 days to get from the capital to Longxi. In other words, we only have 10 days at most to completely destroy the Annam Protectorate and pacify the southwest. It seems like we have to move faster, Huashu Wuzong solemnly said. Old Shi, do you still have water? Let me use your water skin. Behind the high steel walls, an Annam Protectorate veteran licked his slightly dry lips and extended a hand to another veteran next to him. No more, no more. The veteran turned the water skin upside down. The last drop of water flowed out and was caught by the veteran. Don't you see? I don't have enough for myself. If I want to drink water, I'll have to wait a few hours for the higher-ups to distribute it. I don't remember having this sort of water restriction before. Do you think they're telling the truth? There really isn't much water left in the army. A voice came from the side. For a moment, the surroundings were deathly still as everyone stared at the soldier who had spoken. You're seeking death. What nonsense are you spouting? A veteran kicked him to the ground, his eyes constantly drifting to the summit. Although he was doing his utmost to maintain his composure, even he himself was feeling intensely uneasy. The atmosphere was silent, and no one noticed that an uneasy atmosphere was spreading through the army. "Young master, the situation isn't good." The eagle worriedly looked down the mountain. The thing that everyone had been most worried about had occurred. The lack of water had forced the army to impose water restrictions. This would have been fine in the past, but with Daluan Ruozen's words, everything had changed. Even someone like the eagle, who did not understand the art of war, could sense that the morale of the army was completely different from a few days ago. This was a very unsettling sign. "I understand," Wang Chong indifferently said, his face showing no emotion. What had already happened. What he should be thinking about now was how to resolve the problem. Reporting. "The enemy troops at the base of the mountain are on the move." A messenger suddenly rushed to the summit and kneeled down. Buzz. Everyone turned to look down the mountain. The Mengshi Yusang army, which they had not seen for many days, was suddenly restless. Tens of thousands of soldiers were surging in from all directions, a cloud of dust and banners flying everywhere. Their imposing aura seemed to blot out the sun. And in this army, those mountainous elephants were the most frightening. "Not good." The eagle grimaced. "The Uzun are about to attack. Pass on my order. All soldiers, get ready." In the midst of the chaos, Wang Chang's calm voice was exceptionally clear, spreading through the entire army. Bang! The drums thundered, and from the summit to the base of the mountain, the entire army became somber. Clang, clang, clang. The clattering of metal came from the base of the mountain. With the Mengshi Yusang commanders at the center, dazzling rings of light rippled through the entire army. Tens of thousands of war halos of all kinds filled the field of vision. This was the first time in history that the Mengshi Yusang armies had joined forces. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were attacking at the same time, their momentum like a massive wave. This was a stark contrast to the deathly stillness of the Tang army. But even though the mountain was silent, the mood only grew more and more tense. Every soldier of the Annan Protectorate army tightly gripped their weapons, their expressions grim. "Chonga!" On the summit, just as Wang Chong was solemnly looking down the mountain, a voice rang out at his ear. "Father!" Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately reacted. He subconsciously looked down the mountain, at the tall, burly, and imposing figure. This was the ability to transmit sound. Although his back was facing him, with his father's ability, it was not a problem at all. "In a little while, when the battle begins, leave Huishu Wizong and Duan Gichuan to me and Protector General Xinyu. Don't move and don't approach. An opponent of this level isn't someone you can handle." Wang Yan opened his mouth and said with a different meaning in his voice. Ever since they arrived at this mountain range, Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong had been sitting on the sidelines, giving almost all the authority to Wang Chong. But this time, the nature was completely different. "I understand." Wang Chong nodded with a heavy heart. Obviously, even his father and Xinyu Zhongtong felt that the situation was not good this time. There was no more probing, no more contempt. Uzun and Mengshi Zhao were prepared to use all their strength to exterminate them. And they had chosen this moment, when the Tang dynasty's army was facing a water crisis and their morale was at its lowest. Rumble! While the Annam Protectorate's army was on guard, to the southeast, southwest, east, west, north, powerful figures began to appear, all of them exuding a storm of energy. "It's Longkinba." The eagle suddenly stepped forward. "No, there's also Fenjie, Duan Yangyin," Qin Shusun said. One figure after another appeared at the base of the mountain. Longkinba, Fenjie, Duan Yangyin, Siren Xiangxiong, Tumi Sangza, as well as the generals of Mengshi Zhao and the valiant generals of Uzun. All of them stood proudly in the dust, thousands of soldiers behind them. Chapter 601. Although nothing had happened yet, a huge pressure suddenly came crashing down on him. Ever since the start of the battle, the Mengshi Yusang army had only sent 1 or 2 generals. There had been no large-scale deployment of generals. But now, everything was completely different. Longkinba, Fenjie, Duan Yangyan, Xiren Xiangxiong, Tumi Sangs. In the previous battles, any one of these people would have been enough to cause the Tang dynasty a great deal of trouble, let alone all of them. A storm was brewing. At this moment, even the slowest person could tell that they were about to face a fierce battle. Rumble! Smoke and dust billowed. From the south of the mountain range, a torrent of steel surged over. At the very front of the group, two silhouettes were moving side by side. They were very eye-catching. Young Master Wang, have you resolved the problem of water? Loud laughter came from the base of the mountain. Daluan Ruozhen was seated on the back of an Uzun steed. He was the first to look up at the summit, a smile in his eyes. He could sense that the mood of the Tang people was extremely bad. In the past few days, he had been forced to do all sorts of things by Wang Chong, and Daluan Ruozhen had rarely been suppressed to this extent. But in the end, Wang Chong had still managed to find his weak point. Young master, don't speak with him. Even the eagle could tell that Daluan Ruozhen was up to no good in seeking out Wang Chong to speak with him. It's fine. Wang Chong waved his hand. His expression had been grave, but when he heard Daluan Ruozhen's words, he couldn't help but smile. Prime Minister, I know that you're going to launch another attack today. Let's make a bet. Let's bet on how many Uzun and Mengshi Zhao will lose this time. Wang Chong faintly smiled, and as he spoke, he walked up to the banner. On the first day, Uzun and Mengshi Zhao lost nearly 100,000 men. Prime Minister, guess how many of your men will die after this battle ends? I guess half the people here are going to die. What do you think? As Wang Chong spoke, he slowly extended a finger and drew a circle in the direction of the army at the foot of the mountain. Buzz! Hearing these words, Uzun's people didn't have much of a reaction. After all, they didn't understand. However, Mengshi Zhao's people were different. In an instant, the entire army's expressions changed. The atmosphere was completely different from before. Wang Chong's words might just be a threat to others, but to Mengshi Zhao's people, it was a real warning. This was because, among the nearly 100,000 people who died on the first day, more than 80% of them were Mengshi Zhao's men. To these people, Wang Chong's words were definitely not a simple threat. Hi, young master, you have a sharp tongue. Daluan Ruozhen waved his feather fan as an almost imperceptible glint flashed across his eyes. He had to admit that even he didn't expect Wang Chong to use such a move. However, what's the use of having a sharp tongue, young master? Cleverness can be the bane of one's own ingenuity. Young master purposely chose this place to fight us, but in the end, he dug his own grave. Prime Minister, don't you think it's too early to say that? Wang Chong's gaze paused for a moment, then he sneered and said, let's wait until after the battle to decide whose grave. Ha, it's good that young master is so confident. I won't say anything else to you. As Daluan Ruozhen spoke, he turned his gaze in another direction. Seeing this, Wang Chong only smiled and said nothing. Wang Yan Xinyu Zhongtong, this is your last chance. Do you want to surrender? Daluan Ruozhen's voice echoed throughout the battlefield. Prime Minister, don't waste your energy. Let's fight. The battlefield was silent. After a moment, Wang Yan's voice finally rang out. His words were concise and straightforward, leaving no room for negotiation. As you wish. With a cold grunt, Daluan Ruozhen turned his horse around and walked towards the back of the battlefield amidst the billowing dust. Begin. Following the cold voice, rows of high-pitched and desolate yak horns sounded across the sky. Strong winds howled and thick smoke billowed. In this tense atmosphere, the first wave of attack was not from Uzun and Mengshi Zhao's cavalry, but from giant rocks. Boom, boom, boom. Huge rocks whistled and tumbled as they soared into the sky from afar. They drew huge arcs in the void and then smashed into the mountain fiercely. Rumble. Dust billowed. Pieces of the steel wall were tilted and some were even sent flying. Watch out. Screams resounded over the mountain. Under the assault of the giant rocks, the Annam Protectorate soldiers on the mountain began to take cover. The moment the giant rocks fell, the entire Mengshi Yusang army also attacked. Rumble. Amidst the billowing smoke and dust, huge metal shields flickered with a cold, dim light. The White Stone Legion, 70% of which had been killed by the Annam Protectorate in the previous battle, attacked once more. This time, everyone was mobilized, even the injured Duan Wuji. His body was wrapped in bandages, and his aura was flickering between light and dark, strong and weak, but his eyes were bright and spirited. All soldiers advance. Anyone who dares to retreat will be immediately executed. Kill 5 of the Tang people and you will be rewarded with a centurion. Kill 10 of the Tang people and you will be rewarded with 1,000 taels of gold. Duan Wuji's hoarse voice resounded over the battlefield, and the rings of light beneath his feet began to spread to cover the entire army. Bam! To the southeast, the elephants bellowed as they followed closely behind the White Stone Legion. Under the cover of the Mengshi Zhao soldiers, the mountainous Irai elephants began to charge toward the mountain. If one looked carefully, one would discover that the ears of these elephants were glimmering with a white gold light. These were exquisite metal ornaments. In the battle several days ago, Wang Chong had killed more than 200 elephants with just a few roars, and several thousand soldiers had been killed by the rampaging elephants. In order to deal with the Tang people, Meng Shizhao had designed these exquisite ornaments to help the elephants block the soundwave attacks. All of this had been the handiwork of Daluan Ruozhen. To the southwest, Meng Shizhao soldiers dressed in gold and white armor swarmed forward. Whether it was in spirit, energy, or strength, these people were far superior to the rest of the army. They weren't the slightest bit inferior to the Annam Protectorate at the summit, and the quality of their armor was even superior. In all of the Mengshi Zhao Empire, only Crown Prince Fenjie's Dragon Sun Legion could be equipped with such fine armor. This legion was composed entirely of elites, and a significant portion of them were even part of Mengshi Zhao's Imperial Guard. This legion was under the direct command of Jelifeng, and even Fenjie had to obtain Jelifeng's approval before he could mobilize them. As the two armies began to fight, Jelifeng finally handed over Mengshi Zhao's most elite legion to Fenjie. All soldiers hear my order. Without my order, no one is allowed to move. Fully armored, Fenjie stared at the summit, his eyes blazing with the desire to fight. Come Wang Chong. Today, this place will be your burial ground. Fenjie's heart blazed with the flames of war. Never before had Fenjie wanted to destroy an opponent as much as he did now. This was not just for the fallen Jiao Sero, but for himself. In this battle, Wang Chong had overshadowed far too much of his brilliance. If he couldn't surpass his opponent, then the best method was to completely destroy him. Northeast, northwest, south, north. Xiren Xiangxiong, Longqinba, Duan Hengdao, all the Mengshi, Yusang commanders launched their attacks. Behind them were tens of thousands of soldiers, boundless like a sea, endless, surrounding the entire mountain range. Clang clang clang. Countless war halos erupted from their feet and spread throughout the army. All commanders, take up your positions and prepare to attack. On the summit, Wang Chong's voice was calm and composed, spreading through the army. Following Wang Chong's order, the hundreds of Annam Protectorate commanders were like chess pieces, scattered all over the mountain. If one looked down from the sky, they would discover that the distribution of these Tang Dynasty commanders was like the stars in the sky. The Myriad Stars Formation. This was an extremely powerful formation in his previous life. It could link the generals who played a key role in the army into a sturdy fortress. This formation could maximize the strength of these generals and radiate their strength to the rest of the army. This formation had not yet appeared in this era, and Wang Chong did not have enough time to train these commanders. However, a rough demonstration of the Myriad Stars formation was more than enough to raise the fighting power of the army. Boom, boom, boom. Dazzling halos blazed like flames, the halos of thorns connecting with each other to cover the entire mountain. In just a moment, the two armies crashed into each other like a tidal wave. Rumble. No one could describe the impact at that moment. The earth quaked and the mountains swayed. The entire mountain range trembled violently from the impact. Many broken rocks rolled down from the mountain range. Kill! Kill! The first to attack was not the White Stone Legion, but the even more powerful Giant Elephant Legion. The army parted, and an Irai elephant, 8 to 9 meters tall, flapped its huge ears, and rushed up the slope with heavy steps like a gust of wind. Bang! A steel wall weighing 6,000 to 7,000 jin was swept up by the elephant's trunk and was immediately flung into the sky as if it was weightless. Then it was flung down the slope. Ding ding ding. Hooks flew out and latched onto the distant steel walls. Some Tibetan cavalry swiftly turned around and began to madly pull. With a massive boom, the walls collapsed, sending dust into the air. Many of the Mengshizhao soldiers who had been waiting for a long time charged forward. And of all the soldiers, the sharpest was Longkinba. Bizizi. A sharp saber arc cut through the air, and wherever it passed, screams and severed limbs flew through the air. Even the sturdy steel walls were cut open by this saber arc. Longkinba's strength had reached an inconceivable level, and wherever he went, he would create a battlefield of azura. Haha, the so-called Tang dynasty is only SOSO. Chapter 602. Bang! A massive halberd smashed against the mountain. This simple movement seemed to carry the weight of 10,000 jun, and even Longkinba couldn't help but raise his brows. Longkinba, we meet again. A low and deep voice rang out from the cliff. In the vast and mighty gale, that person's long hair fluttered in the wind. On that rock-hard face was a pair of eyes that were as deep as the ocean. Sun Liwei. Longkinba's expression darkened as he stopped. This person's armor was completely different from that of the Annam Protectorate. It was simple and heavy, and there was nothing special about it other than its weight. In truth, this person was not a member of the Annam Protectorate. Wang Yan had several valiant generals under his command. These people were different from ordinary generals. They did not hold any official positions, but their status in the army was so high that not even Chen Shusun could compare. Sun Liwei was one of them. He was not only Wang Yan's personal guard, but also a retainer of the Wang clan. When Wang Yan had joined the army, Duke Jiao had sent him to stand at Wang Yan's side. These people were all experts that had been carefully selected from the army. Whenever Wang Yan joined the army, these people were almost inseparable. They were like Wang Yan's shadow. And when Wang Yan was not present, they could take Wang Yan's place to oversee the army and respond to any unexpected situations. In the month that Lion City had been besieged, Longkinba had been able to kill gods and Buddhas alike. Only Sun Liuyue's appearance had managed to curb his arrogance. Annoying fellow! Longkinba's pupils constricted as he gripped his scimitar and charged forward. Rumble! The moment he charged forward, there was a flash of light as a massive shadow appeared behind him like a demon god. It's finally my turn. As the two armies fiercely clashed, no one noticed a short but capable figure appear on the back of the mountain. Tumi Sangza looked up at the Caltrip waterfall, that was several dozen zhang wide, an inexplicable smile on his face. Boom! With this thought, Tumi Sangza stomped his foot down. Boom! An invisible ripple spread out in every direction. In the next moment, the picture on the hillside suddenly changed. Hundreds of iron men, thousands of them, suddenly stood up from the Caltrip waterfall. These iron men glanced around and quickly cleared the surrounding caltrips. Peng, peng, peng. These metal men picked up the caltrips on the mountain and continuously threw them down the mountain. Nearly 100 metal men moved together, and their speed was incredibly fast. Buzz! Tumi Sangza turned his eyes and quickly aimed at the two massive steel walls. He spread open his fingers and began to summon. Get up! The two huge steel walls twisted as if they were melting. Amidst the deafening roars, two prehistoric beast-like steel giants rose from the ground and climbed up the mountain. With the addition of these two steel giants, the speed of clearing immediately sped up. Once this path is cleared, it will be the best path for cavalry to charge. Tumi Sangza gave a sinister laugh as he looked up the mountain. With the two armies engaged in battle, this was the best time to clear away the caltrips. The Prime Minister's plan was not just to defeat them on the battlefield. Leaving the iron men behind, Tumi Sangza quickly climbed up the mountain. This was an unprecedented battle, far more intense than any of the previous battles. The dense ranks of the Mengshi Yusang army surged forward like a massive wave. Although the 100,000 soldiers of the White Stone Legion had attacked in a frenzy before, the numbers this time were far greater. Every soldier of the Annam Protectorate was under an unimaginable pressure. Although the soldiers on the outermost perimeter each had a large shield in their hands, these shields were trembling like raindrops. The frenzied and concentrated attacks were on the verge of shattering all the bones in their bodies. Not only that, the Mengshi Yusang army was also clearing away the steel walls on the mountain. This further reduced the area in which the soldiers could move, making the Annam Protectorate's situation worse and worse. It's about time. Wang Chong looked down from his vantage point at the entire battlefield. Although the Mengshi Yusang army was coming with a ferocious momentum, everything was still within his control. Boom! As the Mengshi Yusang army pressed forward, layer by layer, Wang Chong's eyes flashed as he suddenly stomped down. Boom! This stomp caused the mountain to sway, and an invisible energy began to radiate out along the surface of the mountain, spreading over the entire battlefield. The bane of the battlefield halo, Wang Chong had finally released the strongest halo in his body. Buzz! An invisible ripple spread out, and the halos beneath the feet of the tens of thousands of Mengshi Yusang soldiers dimmed like candles in the face of a powerful attack. Buzz! In a flash, the auras of the hundreds of thousands of Uzun and Mengshi Zhao soldiers on the mountain dimmed by an entire level. At the same time that Wang Chong unleashed the bane of the battlefield halo. Attack! The Annam Protectorate, which had been on the defensive, chose to take the initiative to attack. Twang twang twang. Deafening booms filled the air, but the first to attack were not the infantry at the base of the mountain, but the ballistae of the Tang dynasty. On flat ground, it was almost impossible for ballistae to circle around the soldiers at the front. But on a mountain like this, everything was possible. Boom boom boom. The tens of thousands of soldiers on the battlefield became the best place for the ballistae to harvest. When the thick inscribed crossbow bolts flew out, spears pierced through the gaps between the shields in front of the front line. In the past, the attacks of these spearmen would have been limited, but now, all the Mengshi Yusang soldiers, whether they were Uzun or Mengshi Zhao, were greatly weakened. The elite spears jolted aside their stellar energy and stabbed into their bodies, raising them high into the air and tossing them away. Squash, squash, squash. In a few short moments, the spear formation was like a forest, constantly lengthening and contracting. Each time it was extended, it was bright, but when it was retracted, it was scarlet. In the blink of an eye, the area around the shield men was covered in corpses. The valiant soldiers of the Mengshi Yusang army were now as limp as rags. Not only that, the shield men at the front of the line, who had been under enormous pressure, now sensed that the attacks were greatly weakened, and the line stabilized. Axemen, get out! At some point in time, a series of earth-shattering roars came from all directions at the edge of the battle line. With a furious roar, massive axes spun and flew out, smashing into the dense sea of Mengshi Yusang soldiers. The moment the axe flew out, the earth quaked in the great Tang camp. Stalwart figures charged out like the most terrifying of beasts, charging straight at the Mengshi Yusang army. Kill for me! The strong axemen had ferocious expressions on their faces. Their veins were bulging, and they were clad in sturdy, high-quality armor. The axes in their hands were inscribed with Xianhua patterns, and they were rampaging through the enemy's camp. Screams filled the air as the Uzun and Mengshi Zhao soldiers were sent flying like straw. Some of the Mengshi Zhao soldiers were even cleaved in two by the axes from left to right. Axemen had always been the strongest of all the infantry soldiers, and they had all been carefully selected. Each axeman was at least at true martial tier 6 or 7, and with the massive weakening effect of Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo, one could easily imagine the power of these axemen. In the army, axemen possessed immense offensive power, and they were always used for breaking formations when the odds were against them. Boom boom boom. To the southeast, southwest, northwest, in all directions, the armies that had held the advantage were instantly routed, unable to stop the enemy. What's going on? How can their strength change so quickly? What kind of power can cover such a large area? The changes on the mountain shocked everyone. This was not the first time Wang Chong had used the bane of the battlefield halo, but the first time it had stopped at the front lines in a battle of tens of thousands of soldiers. But now it was completely different. Even a fool could sense that the bane of the battlefield halo was affecting the entire mountain, and perhaps even far beyond that. Prime Minister, what should we do? All eyes turned to Daluan Ruozhen at the foot of the mountain. Don't worry about it. Such a large halo must consume a lot of energy. Pass on my order, continue the attack. Daluan Ruozhen waved his hand and said without hesitation. Although he didn't know how Wang Chong had done it, to weaken the enemy's halo to such an extent, for Daluan Ruozhen in this world, there was only one thing that could do it. A halo. But as long as it was a halo, it would consume energy, and the more people it covered, the greater the consumption. Wang Chong's halo covered such a large area. For Daluan Ruozhen, it would not take long for it to run out. More importantly, in a war, no matter how powerful a halo or how powerful an existence was, in the face of an army of hundreds of thousands or even millions of soldiers, its effect was negligible. If Huoshu Wuzong alone could win the war, what was the point of having others? But soon, Daluan Ruozhen realized that he was wrong. An impassioned and intense neigh sounded. Under the gazes of countless people, an exceptionally handsome colt with snow-white hooves and beans in its mouth appeared under the flagpole at the top of the mountain. On the back of the horse, the tall and handsome figure was like the sun in the sky, attracting everyone's attention. Chapter 603. Buzz. The air trembled as a halo of thorns began to spread out from the white-hoofed shadow's feet, pouring out like a torrent of water to cover the entire army. The strange halos of thorns began to strengthen the shieldmen, axemen, and archers, instantly increasing the strength of the Annam Protectorate. Even Daluan Ruozhen could see that the great Tang army was clearly exuding a completely different aura, a completely different spirit, stronger than before. One was weakening the enemy while the other was strengthening itself. At this moment, even Daluan Ruozhen couldn't help but widen his eyes. What sort of halo is this? Daluan Ruozhen's mind was in a different state. A normal halo with strength, dexterity, or speed would already be quite decent, but Wang Chong's halo was different. It had three aspects that could simultaneously strengthen all three. In this situation, the 80 to 90,000 soldiers of the Annam Protectorate combined with the terrain was enough to make this mountain impenetrable. Send my order to Duan Yangyan. Have him mobilize the elephant army and immediately break the formation. Daluan Ruozhen's pupils constricted as he issued the order. Wang Chong had many secrets, and in Daluan Ruozhen's understanding, only a great general possessed such a massive halo. And Wang Chong was clearly no great general. Not only that, a halo that increased strength, dexterity, and speed was no ordinary technique. It was extremely rare in any empire, and not even the supreme Great Snow Mountain Temple of the Uzun had many. In addition, the giant army that the Arabs have trained for us should be arriving soon. Have them move out. With these final words, Daluan Ruozhen's eyes turned extremely gloomy. The Uzun and the Arabs had been working together for a very long time, and their cooperation had not been as simple as black kerosene. The giant army was one of them. Roar! An earth-shattering roar suddenly came from afar. The roar contained a strong sense of brutality, wildness, and bloodlust. The voice was as loud as thunder, and it even drowned out the sounds of slaughter and the roar of the giant elephants on the battlefield. The earth rumbled and shook, as if thousands of soldiers and horses were charging over from afar. This huge movement instantly attracted everyone's attention. It also attracted the attention of Wang Chong, who was at the top of the mountain. Wang Chong closed his eyes slightly, and a trace of doubt appeared in his pupils. The war between the Tang dynasty and Meng Shizhao and Uzun had been going on for some time now. All the military branches basically had some understanding of each other. However, Wang Chong was sure that he had never felt such an aura before. Buzz. When he saw what had appeared in the distance, even Wang Chong couldn't help but widen his eyes. In the distance, a group of massive figures had appeared on the horizon. The reason why he called them figures and not warriors was because Wang Chong had never seen such a massive human before. The bodies of these creatures were thick and muscular, and even more astonishing was their height. Each of them was 6 to 7 meters tall, 3 to 4 times the height of a normal human. Their skin was pitch black, their expression savage, and they were grotesquely ugly. Moreover, their bodies were covered in thick plate armor, making one shiver in fear. But there was no doubt that they were humans. "Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Get out of the way!" Cries of alarm came from not the Tang soldiers on the mountain, but the distant Uzun soldiers. When these giants appeared, the wild, savage, and brutal aura they exuded caused even the highland steeds of Uzun's well-trained steeds to yelp in fear and begin to gallop away. Wherever these giants ran, the Uzun soldiers parted like a wave, herding a flock of sheep. Although they were covered in plate armor that weighed nearly 1,000 jin, these giant warriors wielded thick spiked clubs, sticks, spears, and shields, and all of them seemed to be flying. Not even warhorses could compare to them. What sort of monsters are these? Chen Shusan's eyes widened. In his month of fighting with Uzun, he had never seen such monsters appear in Uzun. They were not human, but humanoid monsters. Although these monsters were still very far away, the brutal and bloody aura they exuded was so strong that even Chen Shusun couldn't help but feel his heart thump. This had already surpassed the scope of regular warfare. Cindy! Although these monsters were very far away, Wang Chong could tell at a glance from their pitch-black skin that these people had originally been the impoverished and destitute Cindy. Connecting this to the massive bodies of these giants, a name immediately appeared in Wang Chong's mind. The Skyquaking Army. Wang Chong muttered to himself as he called out this name. In the history of the human race, whether it was in this world or in other parallel dimensions, humans were restricted by their own bloodlines and bones, so no one would ever be taller than 2 meters. People like the invincible great general Li Sai, who was around 2 meters to 4 meters tall, were already extremely rare. But this did not mean that there were no monsters taller and larger than Li Sai. At the very least, in the history that Wang Chong knew, a special army had briefly appeared. The Skyquaking Army. In Wang Chong's memories, in the barren land of Sindh to the west, the Abbasid Caliphate and the Uzun that bordered Sindh had once worked together to carry out a plan. They sent people into Sindh to pick out talented and young orphans who wandered the world. The Abbasid Caliphate and Uzun had raised these orphans from a young age, feeding them all kinds of medicine and feeding them the meat of eagles, tigers, lions, and elephants. They had obtained an ancient technique from a declined ancient sect for them to cultivate. At the same time, they had used a special method to stimulate the acupuncture points in their bodies and stimulate their potential. In the end, they had raised a group of incredibly powerful and massive creatures that they called the Skyquaking Army. It was rumored that each soldier of the Skyquaking Army was 7 to 8 meters tall, with some even approaching 10 some meters. The Abbasid Caliphate constantly used special and ancient techniques to stimulate them and increase their strength. Later on, the soldiers of the Skyquaking Army were trained to the point where they could rely on their physical strength to contend against profound martial realm experts, even imperial martial realm experts. They had apparently been trained using a method completely different from the current martial arts system. Wang Chong had never seen these so-called soldiers of the Skyquaking Army, but he had heard many rumors about them. Moreover, the entire continent had laughed off the legend of the Skyquaking giants, believing it to be a complete joke. After all, how could a person be so tall? But Wang Chong was different. Many years after the Battle of Talas, he had gotten close to a deserter from the Anxi Protectorate Army under Gao Xianji's command. According to this deserter, when Gao Xianji was fighting with the Arabian Empire, the Skyquaking Army had appeared in the Arabian Army, and the Annam Protectorate had even fought with them for a short time. Because Gao Xianji had already been defeated at the time, the Skyquaking Army and the Skyquaking giants raised by the Arabs had only appeared for a brief moment, and not many people knew about them. The deserter from the Annan Protectorate Army that Wang Chong had encountered had also quickly disappeared, so there was no way for him to determine the truth. Thus, Wang Chong could not reveal any more information. But Wang Chong had never imagined that the skyquaking army would appear here. The Uzun really did collude with the Arabs to create the skyquaking army, and the mastermind behind this collusion was actually Dalawan Ruozan. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. He had never imagined that he would encounter the embryonic form of the skyquaking giants so early on. This was even earlier than the legends said. As expected, Dalawan Ruozan is just like Jelifeng, both ambitious and prepared. Even without the matter with Jelifeng, Dalawan Ruozan would still have sent his soldiers. These soldiers of the skyquaking army are the reinforcements they prepared on the plateau. The Annam protectorate of the Arai was completely wiped out, but in this life, it's completely different. Standing on the summit, Wang Chong muttered to himself. Because of his interference, the war in the southwest had taken a completely different path from the one he had taken in his last life. First, a sturdy lion city had appeared on the shores of the Arai, and then a month of siege battles had been added. Soon after, he had established yet another steel fortress on this flat land, yet another mountain that the Mengshi Yusang army could not cross. Now that matters had developed to this point, they had completely deviated from their original trajectory. The Arabs' black kerosene had appeared, and the initial skyquaking army had also appeared, as had the siege vehicles. Not even Wang Chong had any idea how the War of the Southwest would develop. More importantly, Wang Chong knew why Dalawan Ruozan had sent out these things. This was because whether it was the elephants of the Arai forest or the skyquaking giants that the Tibetans and Arabs had trained using secret arts in Sindh, they all used pure physical strength. Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo was completely useless against these Arai elephants and the skyquaking giants. With a heaven-shaking roar, the first to charge was not the distant and terrifying skyquaking giants, but the nearby Arai elephants with their two abnormally long tusks. Boom! The two massive steel walls and the Annam protectorate behind them were thrown into the air. Two Arai elephants, 8 to 9 meters tall and clad in thick white plate armor, led the army of elephants and Uzun soldiers toward the summit. Chapter 604. But this was not the most frightening thing. The most frightening thing was that these Arai elephants were completely unaffected by the weakening effects of the bane of the battlefield halo. At this moment, they had become the sharpest weapons the Mengshi Yusang armies were using to break the formation. With a deafening roar, two massive elephant hooves rose into the air and stomped down on the Annam protectorate on the edge of the battle line. Their faces were brimming with fear, but in the face of these fully armored, invulnerable Arai elephants, the Annam protectorate's resistance was negligible. As the elephants' hooves descended, the Annan protectorate army soldiers didn't even have time to dodge, and even their armor was crushed into meat paste. The elephants raised their trunks high and began to rampage through the Tang army on the summit, none of them a match. Suddenly, a sound wave arrived, the enormous strength contained in this sound wave jolting aside the metal ornaments in the elephants' ears and blasting into their minds. But just when the elephants raised their heads in fright, a metal halberd flew through the air, stabbing deep into the elephants' eyes and into their skulls. The huge elephants' knees went soft, and they knelt heavily on the hillside. Dark red blood gushed out of their eye sockets, and then they stopped moving. Although they possessed powerful vitality and enormous strength, beasts were not humans, and the intelligence of elephants was far inferior to that of humans. In the face of top-class human experts, they were still vulnerable to a single blow. Axe, chop off the guards on the elephants' heads. The middle of the mountain was in chaos. A fully armored general was shouting at the top of his lungs, his eyes red with madness. The Annam protectorate had never been in such a perilous situation. The lives of more than 80,000 soldiers were on the line. If they could not stop this wave of attacks, the entire Annam protectorate would be wiped out. In order to resist this wave of attacks, all of the generals fought with all their might, using all of their strength. Elephants stabbing guards. Bang, bang. Two soldiers of the White Elephant Corps were struck by the spinning axes and dropped from the elephants' heads. A moment later, two Tang Dynasty soldiers nimbly climbed up the elephants' trunks. Squelch. Two sharp swords stabbed into the elephants' eyes. Capture them. Damn it, don't let them get away. Countless sabers, swords, and spears stabbed at the Tang dynasty soldiers on the elephants' heads. But before they could arrive, the elephant stabbing guards immediately rolled off the elephants' corpses and vanished into the crowd. In these 5 days, Daluan Ruozhen and the Mengshi Yusang army had truly thought of many ways to protect the elephants from the Tang, but Wang Chong had also thought of many ways to deal with the Arai elephants of Mengshi Zhao. Rumble. While the battlefield was in a stalemate, there was a massive boom from the southeast. In the most intense moment of the battle, the Mengshi Yusang army in the southeast suddenly retreated without warning. All the Annam Protectorate soldiers were stunned, but in the heat of the battle, their bodies couldn't help but follow the pursuit. Interesting, they're copying me. On the summit, Wang Chong was surveying the battlefield. When he saw this sight, his eyes brightened and he couldn't help but laugh. This scene was incredibly similar. Daluan Ruozhen was using the methods he had used against the Mengshi Zhao army against himself. Pass on my order. Have General Luoji move to the southeast. Yes, your subordinate will go. The guards stood up and quickly left to carry out the order. Daluan Ruozhen, if you want to use my methods to deal with me, you first have to look at who your opponent is. Wang Chong's lips curled into a cold smile. For Daluan Ruozhen to be able to grasp his tactics in such a short time and train an army to deal with him was truly formidable. However, he was still far from being able to use his spear against his shield. Luoji's army was extremely skilled in offense. As long as there was the slightest opportunity, they would not let it go. If the Mengshi Yusang army revealed an opening in front of him, they would only be humiliating themselves. Wang Chong only needed a glance to know that the level of tactics the Mengshi Yusang army had displayed was absolutely incapable of dealing with a commander of Luoji's level. It was like how a bag could hold a stick but not a spear. Turning his gaze away from the southeast, Wang Chong quickly turned his attention to the north. There, an army dressed in dazzling armor of gold and white was charging through the mountains. Even the elites of the Annam Protectorate were incapable of stopping them. The Dragon Sun Corps was the most elite guard of the Mengshi Zhao Empire. Under the leadership of Crown Prince Fenjie, it displayed a terrifying offensive power. Without the protection of the Giant Elephant Corps or the support of other armies, this corps had already pierced through more than half of the Annam Protectorate's lines. Weapons, equipment, strength, the entire Dragon Sun Corps stood at the apex of the Mengshi Zhao Empire. In terms of individual strength, neither the cavalry of Uzun nor the Annam Protectorate of the Tang dynasty could compare to the Dragon Sun Corps of Mengshi Zhao. Even Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo was greatly weakened against them, making it far less effective than it was against other armies. The Dragon Sun Corps was the trump card of the Mengshi Zhao Empire. In the Battle of Arai, Jelifeng had used this sharp sword to pierce through the defenses of the Annam Protectorate and crush Xinyu Zhongtong. In the frenzied assault of the Mengshi Yusang army, the one that posed the greatest threat to the Tang people was not Duan Yangyan's Giant Elephant Corps, but the Dragon Sun Corps led by Fenjie. To Wang Chong, the Dragon Sun Corps was the pawn of the Mengshi Yusang army that he wanted to eliminate the most. Begin. Wang Chong turned his head to Lin Wushou. This general will go. Lin Wushou's expression was solemn as he bowed and quickly left, vanishing from the summit. All soldiers, hear my order. Everyone, obey my orders. Anyone who falls behind will be executed. Fenjie's eyes blazed with an unprecedented fighting intent. His gaze remained fixed on the summit, and in the entire world, he could see nothing but Wang Chong. Kill him. For Jiasiluo, and for myself. Fenjie's mind was in turmoil. He was like an arrow released from a bow, never stopping until he had reached his goal. There was only one thought in his mind: eliminate Wang Chong. Crane wing formation. Advance at full speed. Fenjie unsheathed his sword, his body covered in blood as he continued forward, stepping over the corpses of the Tang dynasty soldiers. Behind him, pieces of armor seemed to have a life of their own. They broke free from the corpses and turned into iron men. Clang, clang, clang. Fenjie extended a palm, and before the Annam Protectorate soldiers could get close, Their swords flew out of their hands and their armor twisted and deformed as they fell to the ground with screams. Rumble! Just as Fenjie was leading the Dragon Sun Legion in a triumphant march, the sound of galloping hooves came from behind him, accompanied by an unending stream of screams. Fenjie trembled and turned his head. He saw that a cavalry unit had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and cut Fenjie's Dragon Sun Legion in two. The cavalry of the Tang dynasty. Fenjie's pupils constricted, all the hair on his body standing on end. After fighting the Tang dynasty for so many days, Fenjie had never seen the cavalry of the Tang dynasty. The sudden appearance of this Tang dynasty cavalry was like a needle stabbed into Fenjie's heart. Retreat and defend. Fenjie's body went cold as he let out the most mournful howl he had ever let out in his life. For an army to be cut in half at the waist was an extremely dangerous signal to any soldier. If they were cut in half by the Tang dynasty, half of the Dragon Sun Legion would end up in the Tang dynasty's pocket. On the first day of the battle, Fenjie had personally witnessed the fate of the 8,000 Uzun cavalry that had fallen into the Tang dynasty's encirclement. If they could not promptly break out of the encirclement, the Dragon Sun Legion would suffer unprecedented damage since its founding. Boom! The nearly 100 metal men were the first to charge back, and then the rest of the Dragon Sun Legion followed suit. Retreat and defend. Retreat and defend. Fenjie's hoarse roar threw the entire army into chaos, but it was already too late. With a heaven-shaking roar, a unit of Tang dynasty axemen fiercely charged forward, their massive axes whistling through the air as they smashed down. Amongst the infantry, axemen were the most powerful in terms of attack power, and at the same time, they were also the best type of soldier for breaking through defenses. Fenjie had never imagined that Wang Chong would use this army to deal with him at this time. Stop them! Fenjie's eyes were wide with rage, his entire body filled with an unprecedented tension. But before all of this could begin, there was a scream as the axemen appeared and another unit of shieldmen charged out from the left. Kill! Battle cries shook the heavens and the earth. The Annam Protectorate, which had been steadily losing ground, suddenly charged from all sides, cold light flashing and a forest of swords. Not even Fenjie knew how many soldiers Wang Chong had prepared to deal with him. Success! In the midst of the chaos, the wild cheers of a Tang dynasty general suddenly came from behind him. Fenjie turned his head. To his left and right, countless soldiers of the Annam Protectorate were cooperating with the Tang dynasty cavalry. In a short period of time, they had completely surrounded and cut up the Dragon Sun Legion. Damn it, I've been tricked! Fenjie was both shocked and furious, his vision going black. He had never imagined that Wang Chong's reaction would be so swift and fierce. By the time he could react, it was already too late. This is what they call the hard but easy to break. On the summit, Wang Chong watched as the army gradually closed in and the Dragon Sun Legion fell into a tight encirclement. With a sneer, he quickly turned his attention elsewhere. In the end, Fenjie was still too young, and his attainments in the art of war were far from his own level. If one could unify the world by relying on a strong army, then wouldn't the Tang dynasty have already unified the world? What use would they have then for the art of war? The fate of the Dragon Sun Legion had already been decided. To Wang Chong, there was an even more important matter for him to complete. Careful! All soldiers on guard. Put everything on the defense. Chapter 605. Bestial and savage roars came from the base of the mountain. The earth rumbled and the heavy footsteps seemed to stomp on everyone's heart. Careful! They're coming! Stop them! We can't let them break through our defense line. At the very front of the battle line, countless soldiers stared at the massive black silhouettes emerging from the roiling dust, their palms drenched in cold sweat. After such a long time, the egg-shaking legion's giants finally rushed over. Bang! A metal cudgel as thick as a thigh howled through the air, its enormous strength sending 5 or 6 Annam Protectorate army soldiers flying. Before the rest of the soldiers could surround the cudgel, a massive arm grabbed the edge of the steel walls and fiercely pushed aside these massive weights. Aslan Kadafi Luo. Kelsalai slap. The massive and ugly sky-quaking giants uttered some inexplicable words as they charged up the mountain. Before their massive bodies, the Annam Protectorate warriors were as insignificant as ants. Bang, bang, bang. The giants charged forward. Whether it was the defense line, the walls, or the massive shields, they were all unable to withstand a single blow. One Tang soldier after another was sent flying, none of them a match for the giants. They weren't even able to slow them down in the slightest. Wherever the giants passed, the Tang people fell into chaos. The eagle. As Wang Chong gazed down the mountain at the fearsome sky-quaking giant, he suddenly said, "The sky-quaking giants are invincible. Your subordinate understands." There was no need for Wang Chong to say more. The eagle unsheathed his woozy steel sword and turned behind him, his expression grave. "Zhang Long, Zhao Hu, all of you follow me." As Old Eagle spoke, he mounted a warhorse and charged down the mountain. The Black Dragon Gang members followed closely behind. All the sky-quaking giants were covered in thick and sturdy floor armor, a defense that Uzun and the Arabs had jointly forged for them. In the entire army, the only weapon that could pierce through this armor was the woozy steel swords of Wang Chong's subordinates. The eagle's warhorse charged down from the top of the mountain, colliding with the earthquake giant at the foot of the mountain. The huge recoil threw the eagle and his warhorse into the air, but the next moment, the eagle did a somersault, the woozy steel sword in his hand slashing down at the giant in midair. A blood-curdling scream came from the giant's mouth. The mountainous figure was filled with terror as it staggered backward. Not far from him, an arm as thick as an adult's waist fell into the dust, blood gushing out. The eagle descended from the sky and crouched on the ground. Looking at the severed arm, a smile suddenly appeared on his face. For a moment, the mountain was deathly still. The countless giants around the eagle were staring at him, their massive eyes staring at the eagle, or more accurately, at the woozy steel sword in the eagle's hand. For the first time, they showed fear. This was the first time they had seen something in the hands of these weak humans that could harm them. "It seems that it's time for me to enter the stage." At the foot of the mountain, in the center of thousands of gazes, a tall and straight figure smiled and suddenly took a step forward. Rumble. The ground quaked, and dust billowed. The entire area, along with the battlefield where hundreds of thousands of soldiers were fighting, trembled violently, as if it were about to shatter. "This is..." Wang Chong's pupils constricted as he sensed the astonishing tremors coming from behind him. The number of people in the southwest with such a tyrannical aura could be counted on one hand. And in that direction, Wang Chong could only think of one person. Huoshu Wuzong. Turning his head, Wang Chong gazed toward the southwest. In the center of the earth, Wang Chong finally saw that figure. From the start of the battle until now, besides that long howl that had interrupted the Arai elephants, Huoshu Wuzong had not made any other attacks, nor had he revealed any of his skills or cultivation. Until this moment, boom! There was nothing in front of him, nothing at all, but the moment he saw Huoshu Wuzong, Wang Chong clearly sensed an enormous pressure sweeping over him like a tide. Even from a great distance, Wang Chong could still feel that oppressive pressure, that terrifying power that could explode at any moment like a raging inferno. Buzz. It was only a tiny bit of power, but Wang Chong could clearly see a vast azure light shoot up from Huoshu Wuzong's head. This invisible yet tangible power was like a sharp sword, stirring up the dark clouds overhead. So powerful! Wang Chong's eyes widened as he felt an unprecedented pressure. There were many legends about Huoshu Wuzong. Although there were many things that could not be verified, there was one thing that was beyond doubt. Huoshu Wuzong was an imperial great general of the Uzun Empire, a saint martial expert. Although the legends of the Tang dynasty said that of the experts of the three kingdoms, Jelifeng, Duan Gichuan, Huoshu Wuzong, and Zhangzhou Jianqiong, the strongest had to be the tiger of the empire, Zhangzhou Jianqiong, but Huoshu Wuzong was definitely not too far off. Alas, Zhangzhou Jianqiong isn't here. Wang Chong's heart was heavy. His father's strength was definitely not enough to contend against Huoshu Wuzong, and Xinyu Zhongtong was no match for Duan Gichuan. The two of them were still some distance away from the imperial great general level. The only thing that could make the Annam Protectorate stand against the Mengshi, Yusang army was the Tang dynasty's numerous generals and formations. This was the greatest characteristic of the Tang dynasty when it came to foreign conquests, and it was also the method that the Tang dynasty used to protect itself against foreign experts. Chonga, no matter what happens next, you must not get close. This is a battle between us and Huoshu Wuzong. A familiar voice sounded in his ear. Wang Yan's voice was calm and steady, and it even faintly revealed some sort of awareness. Civil officials do not love wealth, but generals do not fear death. This was the understanding that every general on a foreign campaign should have. Huoshu Wuzong was the most formidable opponent that Wang Yan had ever encountered, and this was definitely not their first battle. But no matter what, Wang Yan would not cower. The more than 80,000 Tang dynasty soldiers would not make him cower. Father, Wang Chong stared at his father's back, his mind in agitation. His father had always given him a cold and harsh impression. He rarely smiled or showed any emotion, but this time, Wang Chong felt something completely different. My strength is still too lacking. I have to get stronger as quickly as possible. Father, be at ease. No matter what, I won't let you fight alone. In the howling winds, Wang Chong clenched his fists, his long hair dancing in the wind. Ever since his reincarnation, his strength had advanced very quickly. To an ordinary person, this was completely unimaginable, but in a battle of this level, he was still far too weak. There's only one way left. In a flash, a thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind. He remembered the Stone of Destiny's bane of all generals. No matter what Wang Chong thought, on the other side, Wang Yan and Huoshu Wuzong's movements attracted the attention of the entire battlefield. Wang Yan, are you still going to put up a stubborn resistance? A thunderous voice swept through the sky above the mountain, echoing throughout the entire battlefield. Huoshu Wuzong looked at Wang Yan, who was at the top of the mountain, and the densely packed generals of the Tang dynasty who surrounded him like stars surrounding the moon. Huoshu Wuzong had the ghost of a smile on his face. Up until now, no matter what strategy Wang Chong used, no matter how many losses he suffered in the early stages, Huoshu Wuzong did not care too much. Soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals. No matter how the people of the Central Plains viewed a war, to Huoshu Wuzong, a war would always be decided by the battle between the top forces of both sides. As long as he killed Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong, the entire Annam Protectorate would collapse without a fight. If the great general wants a battle, Wang Yan will naturally accompany you, Wang Yan said calmly. His rumbling voice resounded through the entire sky. His voice was not overbearing, but it had a tenacity and boldness that could not be shaken by anything. He was like a rock in the middle of a river, fearless in the face of thousands of huge waves. He was like a lush green bamboo, unbending in the face of a violent storm. Wang Gingji is indeed worthy of being the descendant of a general. Just this alone makes him worthy of being my opponent. A strange look flashed through Huoshu Wuzong's eyes. The breadth of mind and boldness that Wang Yan displayed was something that even he, a general of the Uzun, could not help but admire. If that's the case, then let's fight. With a clang, Huoshu Wuzong unsheathed his long saber and strode forward. Behind him, thick smoke billowed and warhorses neighed. The most elite guards under Huoshu Wuzong, along with all the remaining Uzun Iron Cavalry, formed an army of more than 100,000 and swept toward the top of the mountain. The atmosphere there was earth-shattering and extremely frightening. Up to this point in the battle, Huoshu Wuzong had finally mobilized his entire army. Spread out! A stern shout came from the top of the mountain, and in an instant, the army parted like waves. The 40,000 troops of the Tang dynasty that had not been involved in the battle since the beginning of the war also began to move. Buzz! Several dozen streams of energy soared into the sky. As countless people watched, a pitch-black horse like a dragon leaped down from the summit. Wang Yan took the lead, leading the countless elite generals of the Tang dynasty toward Huoshu Wuzong. Huoshu Wuzong was an Uzun great general. No one in the southwest was a match for him, and no defense line could stop him. To a supreme expert like Huoshu Wuzong, the steel walls that Wang Chong had erected on the mountain were like clay chickens and pottery dogs. Boom! Wang Yan stomped down, and several dozen Mengshi Yusang soldiers on the mountain walls screamed as they were sent flying like ragdolls. Just like the soldiers of the Tang dynasty could not stop Huoshu Wuzong, the soldiers of the Uzun and Mengshi Zhao could not stop Wang Yan. Retreat. Chapter 606. This battle drew the attention of countless people. Uzun, Mengshi Zhao, and countless generals of the Tang dynasty all looked over. This battle that had yet to begin was even more important than their own battle. Boom! The wind howled, and dust billowed, filling the world. In the deepest part of the dust, a purplish-green saber energy tore through the void. It was 100 zhang long, cleaving through the void as it slashed toward Wang Yan and the others on the mountain. Wherever the saber energy passed, huge black cracks appeared in the air. This saber energy caused everyone's expression to change. In the entire Annam Protectorate, whether it was Luoji or Chen Shusun, they were all insignificant before this saber energy. This was not something that any general could block. Buzz! In the blink of an eye, just as Huoshu Wuzong attacked, the mountain suddenly changed. Rumble! As countless people watched in shock, the halos of Wang Yan and the several dozen generals of the Tang dynasty flashed. The halos suddenly blazed with light, and in the blink of an eye, they merged into one, transforming into a giant golden-armored god that stood up from the mountain. Mighty miracle god! Wang Chong's heart surged, and a thought flashed through his mind. The Tang dynasty possessed several powerful formations that could gather the strength of other generals, or even an entire army, to form an extremely powerful existence. The mighty miracle god formation was one of them, and it was the most powerful force in the army under Wang Chong's father, Wang Yan. Wang Chong had only heard of it in the past, but had never seen it for himself. This was the first time Wang Chong had seen his father use the mighty miracle god formation. Boom! An earth-shattering boom rang out, shaking heaven and earth, and the entire mountain range trembled. Wang Chong gazed into the distance and saw that under the gloomy sky, the mighty miracle god had joined his palms together and blocked Huoshu Wuzong's earth-shattering saber strike. Without the slightest hesitation, the mighty miracle god raised his mountainous right hand at the same time he blocked the saber strike and punched heavily at the place where Huoshu Wuzong was. Before his fist had even landed, the tremendous force of his punch had already caused the air within a radius of several thousand feet to completely disappear. The earth rumbled and emitted bursts of unbearable rumbling, as if it would split apart at any moment. Just as Huoshu Wuzong was about to perish under the mighty miracle god's fist, a brilliant golden light suddenly erupted, and an earth-shattering Buddhist chant rang out between heaven and earth. A series of inexplicable incantations rang out between heaven and earth. Right before everyone's eyes, a golden Buddha over 100 feet tall with scorching red flames rose from the ground where Huoshu Wuzong had been standing just a moment ago. Boom! The golden Buddha that was over 100 feet tall raised a single palm to block the mighty miracle heavenly god's sure-kill attack. Boom! The earth crumbled and debris and rocks shot up into the air like a waterfall of several hundred feet. All of the nearby warhorses neighed in anguish as they were tossed into the air, torn to shreds by the stellar energies of the battle. The destructive power of the battle struck fear into the hearts of everyone who saw it. Great Sun Buddha Golden Body Mantra. Huoshu Wuzong has finally used it. In a place where no one could see, the great general of Mengshi Zhao, Duan Gichuan, stared at the golden Buddha over 100 feet tall, and a long-awaited smile appeared on his face. The Great Sun Buddha Golden Body Mantra was one of the supreme techniques of the Great Snow Mountain Temple. In all of the Uzun Empire, only great generals could cultivate this technique. The great generals of Uzun all cultivated different techniques. Outsiders would never have the chance to see them, and this was Duan Gichuan's first time seeing one. The supreme techniques of the Great Snow Mountain Temple truly are formidable. Duan Gichuan subconsciously turned his gaze to another part of the summit. There, the newly appointed Annan Protector General was standing motionlessly, A large number of generals gathered around him. The only ones in the army that had not moved were him and Xinyu Zhongtong. The Annam Protectorate's Vajra god and Wang Yan's mighty miracle god were the two mountains that stood between the Mengshi Yusang army. In the defeat at Irai, Duan Gechuan had already seen Xinyu Zhongtong's Vajra god. The Vajra god was reputed to be the strongest formation of the southwest. If the person using it had been Xinyu Zhongtong, Duan Gechuan would definitely have retreated, but Xinyu Zhongtong's strength wasn't even 70% of Zhangqiu Jianxiong's, so Duan Gechuan naturally had nothing to fear. He couldn't do anything to Xinyu Zhongtong, and Xinyu Zhongtong couldn't do anything to him. This was why the two of them had bided their time and allowed Wang Yan and Huoshu Wuzong to fight. Boom! While Wang Yan's army was fiercely clashing with Huoshu Wuzong, the sounds of fighting came from another direction. Wang Chong turned his head and saw that hundreds of thousands of soldiers were using this chance to surge up the mountain. Daluan Ruozhen. Wang Chong's pupils constricted, and as he looked through the air, he saw a familiar figure in the dense army at the base of the mountain, dressed in an azure robe and holding a feather fan. It was none other than Daluan Ruozhen. Only Daluan Ruozhen could use this chance to draw the attention of Wang Yan and Huoshu Wuzong to launch an attack. The army of hundreds of thousands was like a vast sea, and in the blink of an eye, a powerful pressure washed over them. As expected, this was where Daluan Ruozhen was primarily attacking. He had used the direction of his father and Huoshu Wuzong as bait. Wang Chong could smell danger. All soldiers, listen up. Get into position. Archers, get ready. Wang Chong's loud voice resounded across the entire battlefield. Following Wang Chong's voice, the entire mountain peak suddenly fell silent. All the soldiers and generals seemed to have frozen in place, and an austere aura soared into the sky. What no one knew was that Wang Chong's myriad stars formation had already started to operate. Although it wasn't a complete state and was only in its embryonic form, in Wang Chong's hands, it was enough to display a portion of its combat power. Prime Minister. At the base of the mountain, an elderly Uzun elder stood together with Daluan Ruozhen with a worried expression. This was a tribal elder of the Uzun Plateau. Whenever the Uzun went to war, there would occasionally be a few wise tribal elders who would follow him. Wang Chong's commands had left a deep impression on this elder, and it had also made him wary of the Tang dynasty youth on the summit. There's no way out. Wang Zhongxi is already on his way to Longxi. If the great General King also fails, Geshu Han will lead his army south, and our operation will be a complete failure. There are sacrifices in war, and no matter what, we must win this war. Daluan Ruozhen stood at the base of the mountain, his eyes shining with unprecedented resolve. At this moment, he didn't seem like a civil minister, but a fierce general. The art of war of the Central Plains says that we should multiply the enemy, and we have far more soldiers than they do. This is our greatest advantage right now. No matter what kind of military strategy he has, as long as we maintain our absolute advantage and continue to exert pressure on him, compressing his space, in the end, all of his military strategies will collapse. This is our greatest weapon to destroy them. This, I understand. Chapter 607. Boom! Without the slightest hesitation, the two armies crashed against the mountain like howling waves. This was the most intense clash since the start of the battle. Other than Jelifeng and Duan Gechuan, the rest of the army of more than 400,000 had been thrown into the battle. This time, Daluan Ruozhen did not use any tactics. He simply pushed forward, using his overwhelming strength to push his way up the mountain. When one's army far outnumbered the other, numbers became the greatest tactic, the greatest strategy. Kill! Kill! A series of earth-shattering shouts rang out, and the rolling black steel wave was enough to make everyone's expression change in horror. Ready! Ready! Forward! Wang Chong's voice resounded over the mountain. The first to attack was not the surging Mengshi Yusang army, but the Annam Protectorate on the summit. Swish, swish, swish. The first volley of arrows howled through the air, landing in the middle of this flood of steel. Bang! Like a boulder falling into a river, countless arrows pierced through necks, cheeks, knees, and bodies. Hundreds of Mengshi Yusang soldiers immediately collapsed to the ground, the flood of Mengshi Yusang soldiers immediately falling into disorder. Swish swish swish. 1 wave, 2 waves, 3 waves. Countless arrows rained down in a concentrated manner, and the chaos continued to increase. It's useless. When the number of soldiers reaches a certain level, local victories and defeats are no longer important. Daluin Ruozhen looked up the mountain, his eyes calm. In an army of 100 soldiers, if 100 died, it would be a complete wipeout. In an army of 200, if 100 died, it would be a heavy injury. In an army of 1,000, it would be a setback. And when the number increased to several thousand, or even tens of thousands, the effect would be negligible. The damage caused by Wang Chong's archers was insignificant to the army of hundreds of thousands. However, Daluin Ruozhen had still underestimated Wang Chong's strategic intentions. As waves of arrows rained down, Wang Chong immediately activated the myriad stars formation when the hundreds of thousands of black steel torrents were thrown into disorder and revealed a slight flaw. The tens of thousands of soldiers of the Annam Protectorate were like countless torrents of water, constantly crisscrossing, colliding, and crashing into each other like ropes as they charged down the mountain toward the Mengshi Yusang army. Congratulations to user for killing 12,000 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 33,000 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 88,000 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 34,000 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. In a few short moments, a string of voices poured out of Wang Chong's mind like a waterfall. Countless halos were clattering and colliding on the surface of the mountain. Attack halos, strength halos, speed halos, strength halos, defense halos, charge halos, hundreds of thousands of different war halos covered every inch of the mountain. The intensity of this battle had far surpassed anyone's imagination. Not even Wang Chong had expected it to be this intense. Wang Chong's myriad stars formation was like the sharpest of ropes, slicing apart the Mengshi Yusang army, surrounding it, and then constantly harvesting it. The Mengshi Yusang army was felled like wheat, and the data pouring down from Wang Chong's mind clearly displayed the severity of the Mengshi Yusang army's losses. Daluin Ruozhen seemed to have made the ultimate decision. He was using massive casualties to reduce the space the Tang army had to maneuver. As wave after wave of Mengshi Yusang soldiers fell, the other armies in the rear would quickly take their place. This method was simple, cruel, and extremely effective. After paying a heavy price, the Tang army's space to maneuver had been squeezed to the limit. At this point, not even Wang Chong had much room to maneuver. When faced with a fierce, valiant, decisive, and daring enemy commander who disregarded sacrifice and cost, even Wang Chong's art of war was no longer as easy to deal with. Against such an opponent, even Wang Chong couldn't help but feel a sense of solemnity. "Milord, we've paid a heavy price." The old chief found it hard to maintain his composure as he watched the soldiers fall in droves. At the base of the mountain, he could clearly see a bloody torrent cascading down from the summit. The intensity of the battle was beyond imagination. The earth of the mountain had already been dyed red by the blood of the soldiers. At this point, it was no longer clear whether this was the Mengshi Yusang armies or the Annam protectorates. "There's nothing to be done. This is a price we must pay." Daluin Ruozhen slightly closed his eyes. Not even he could remain calm in the intensity of the battle. The fighting power displayed by the Annam protectorate on the mountain had already surpassed imagination. Not even Zhangqiu Jianxiong, who had been in charge of the Ngari royal lineage for decades, had been able to force him to this state. But all of this was a price that had to be paid. Human wave tactics. This sort of Tang dynasty is truly too unsettling. If the Tang dynasty has a few more talents like this, the Uzun will never be able to contend against it. Daluin Ruozhen looked at the summit, a sliver of unease in his heart. As the war in the southwest continued, not even Daluin Ruozhen realized that his original goal had changed from exterminating the more than 80,000 Annam protectorate soldiers to eliminating that Wang Chong who had appeared out of nowhere. In the depths of Daluan Ruozen's mind, eliminating Wang Chong was a higher priority than even the Annam Protectorate. But it just so happened that Daluan Ruozen could not reveal any of these thoughts. Wang Chong's vigilance was far more formidable than anyone could imagine. Putting aside the fact that he was surrounded by layers upon layers of Annam Protectorate soldiers, the slightest hint that Wang Chong might throw caution to the wind and flee if the situation turned for the worse. Having seen Wang Chong disguise himself as an Uzun soldier to attack Meng Shizhao, as well as disguise himself as a Meng Shizhao soldier to attack Uzun, Daluan Ruozen actually had no confidence in being able to keep him here. Rumble! The battle was still going on. In the south, the gigantic mighty miracle god and the golden Vairocana Buddha were engaged in a fierce battle on the mountain range. A golden halo that resembled the radiant sun faintly appeared behind the Vairocana Buddha's neck, and behind him, a gigantic snowy mountain faintly appeared. This was a supreme technique of the Great Snow Mountain Temple being used to its fullest potential. Buzz! Stellar energy gathered from all around, strengthening the halo and the image of the snow mountain behind the dignified and divine Vairocana Buddha. Although the Uzun Empire did not have a supreme battle technique like the mighty miracle god formation, it still had techniques and artifacts that could borrow the strength of its soldiers. Even though it was of a much lower level than the mighty miracle god formation, it was still a powerful formation. Nay! Behind Huoshu Wuzong, highland steeds neighed miserably as they fell to the ground, and the usually ferocious Uzun soldiers also collapsed to the ground as if all their strength had been sucked out. At the same time, opposite Huoshu Wuzong, the Annam Protectorate was not in a good situation either. Clang, clang, clang. The halo vibrated, and the auras of countless Annam Protectorate soldiers visibly weakened. The mighty miracle god formation could not only absorb the strength of other generals, but it could also absorb the strength of other soldiers. This was also the reason why Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong were able to resist Huoshu Wuzong and Duan Gichuan through the formation. The battle in the south was in a stalemate, and on the other side, the battle between Wang Chong and Daluan Ruozen had also entered a white-hot stage. Warning! 1280 Annam Protectorate casualties. Warning! 2314 Annam Protectorate casualties. Warning! 3215 Annam Protectorate casualties. Warning! 3847 Annam Protectorate casualties. A string of warnings rang out in Wang Chong's mind. Daluan Ruozen's strategy had finally begun to show results, and Wang Chong's Annam Protectorate was beginning to suffer heavy casualties. This was a contest of wills, and the effects of strategy were becoming extremely small. Daluan Ruozen's Mengshi, Yusang army continued to surge up the mountain. No matter how much resistance they encountered, it seemed like they would never stop. No matter how many casualties there would always be more soldiers surging up the mountain. But the 40,000 soldiers commanded by Wang Chong displayed a different side. They were callous and calm, like a rock before the raging waves. No matter how many Mengshi Yusang soldiers surged forward, they would never retreat. Whether it was Wang Chong or Daluan Ruozen, both sides had suffered heavy casualties. Cavalry, mount your horses. At the most intense moment of the battle, Wang Chong's eyes flashed as he suddenly mounted the white-hoofed Shadow's horse. Behind him, war horses neighed as one powerful Tang Dynasty cavalry after another leaped onto the summit. Clang! Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong unsheathed his Wuzi steel sword. Lin Wushou, I'll leave the command to you. The white-hoofed Shadow let out a heaven-shaking neigh as it led the 2,000-some Tang Dynasty cavalry down the mountain like a bolt of lightning. At this point, all of the Tang Dynasty's reserves had been used up. Rumble! No one could describe the impact Wang Chong's 2,000-strong cavalry had inflicted on the Mengshi Yusang army. Wang Chong had chosen precisely where the Mengshi Yusang army was lacking in soldiers, its weakest point. The rapid charge of the cavalry, the amplification of the terrain and the halo of Dusk Stallion had transformed Wang Chong's 2,000-strong cavalry into the sharpest blade, piercing through the entire Mengshi Yusang army. Rumble! The entire mountain was thrown into chaos. Wang Chong's myriad stars formation had already been exerting a constant pressure, but Wang Chang's 2,000-strong cavalry had become the straw that broke the camel's back. Screams resounded from the summit as the Mengshi Yusang army fell into chaos. Wang Chang's myriad stars formation pushed forward, and countless Uzun and Mengshi Zhao soldiers fell to the ground. Congratulations to user for killing 78615 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 86135 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 91543 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 98712 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. A string of voices washed over Wang Chang's mind like a waterfall, and when all the voices reached their peak, something completely unexpected occurred to Wang Chang. Congratulations to user for killing more than 200,000 foreign soldiers. The conditions for advancement have been met, and the bane of the battlefield Halo has been upgraded to the 3rd level. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.